the opportunities for growth and development in Nigeria and across Africa abound. The future of Nigeria as a stable, prosperous nation remains very uncertain due to the extreme levels of corruption in the public and private sectors. This is why the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, in collaboration with Center for International Private Enterprise, is hosting the first Africa Business Ethics Conference to hold in Nigeria, providing a platform for insightful and constructive deliberations about tackling corruption in Nigeria and in Africa as a continent. The theme for ABEC Nigeria 2020 is tackling corruption to reduce poverty, unemployment, and insecurity. This presentation is orchestrated to interrogate the manifestation and impact of corruption in the following spheres of the Nigerian economy. 1. What really is the cost of corruption to you as an individual and to your business? 2. What is the cost of corruption in the informal and underbanked sector? And 3. What really is the cost of corruption on security, peace, and freedom? From a survey on MSMEs and businesses in Lagos, Kano, and Aba, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry found that 76% of MSMEs said they paid a bribe to a government official in the past few months. Processing consistency and lack of transparency in regulatory agencies increases cost of processing official requirement by between 5 to 50%. Little wonder Kofi Annan once said, if corruption is a disease, transparency is a central part of its treatment. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the topics for our plenary and breakout sessions for day 1 shall cover the following issues. A. Tackling corruption in the maritime industry. B. Transparency and accountability in public procurement and spending. And C. The supply side of corruption, prioritizing ethics and integrity in business culture.
Seeing is believing. When you are supposed to get something out in time and you are not getting it, and at the end of the day, when money exchange hands, you get it out. I mean, you have to weigh your options.
We are on the verge of completing registration with a government agency in Nigeria here, and the funny thing is, in bringing that product to market, and particularly from an SME standpoint, we had to take loans, and it took us 2 years. 2 years to get that product registered. Over 2 years. Now, in that 2 years, we borrowed money. Interest began to run on the loans that we collected, and we've had to pay. For each of those years, we've had to pay 20% on those loans that we've collected. We had not even started. We've not brought the product to market. We have already started paying, percentage interest on those loans.
Let me not even use government. Let me look at my company. Years ago, we were bagging at the ports. And I remember we had cables that are needed to connect the grabs to the vessel. And I remember they would go missing quite frequently, and we would buy new ones. And I remember my boss at the time asking me very sternly, why is this happening? Why are we doing this? And I remember telling him, because it's cheaper for us to allow the staff to steal those cables so that the ships are not delayed in the processing. And I think a lot of people have these stories. There's always a small percentage that, this is for your own people. They're going to take it. So you almost officially leave it for them to take so that you can manage the theft or the corruption at a manageable scale.
The mindset of customer officers needs to be changed in the maritime sector. The federal government should stop giving the Nigerian Customs Service revenue targets, because the primary role of customs under the World Customs Organization is trade facilitation. And when you facilitate trade, revenue is generated. But in this country, the federal government makes revenue generation the primary responsibility of customs, which is not the case. It's supposed to be a trade facilitation agency.
Your Excellencies and Captains of Industry, welcome to Day 2 of Africa Business Ethics Conference 2020. Our topics for plenary and breakout session for Day 2 shall cover the following issues: the menace of corruption on the engine of growth in Africa, empowering the media and promoting press freedom to tackle corruption and strengthen accountability in Nigeria, harnessing technology to mitigate corruption and to maximize public policy for public good. Before we start, let's ask, what is the cost of corruption to consumers?
Well, I think there are different angles we can look at. Let's look at it from a study point of view. MIT did a study some years ago, and even though it was an international study, I think Nigeria applies as well. And that study showed that consumers like you or myself are willing to pay up to about 10% higher for goods that we are sure of the supply chain, we are sure has no corrupt influences, we are sure that has an authentic chain all the way through that no one has tampered with. So on the surface, the first point is that when we know there's no corruption, we know that consumers want to pay more.
Level and the stage at which it has become systemic is principally fueled by the public sector, not just politicians but civil servants. And in the country, with the level of poverty we have, anybody that makes money is celebrated, and nobody cares about how the money is made. So it elevates corruption to the level of if I may use the word in inverted commas, an endorsed process for making money. So there is no level playing field for young graduates to go into honest business.
The situation is that it's either you take it or you leave it. And the moment you start mentioning their names in the press, they start running back to ask, you should have called us. Why do we have to? Are we not paying for these services? We don't have to. And as industrialists, we need to be encouraged, because there are a lot of frustration when it comes to manufacturing. Apart from frustration that is eating you up, there's financial loss.
Our cost of financing is extremely high. We do not have access to credit. And if you put that in the context of a country that's importing probably about 300,000 to 400,000 vehicles, and these are the used vehicles, it then helps you put into perspective the problem we're dealing with. We only import maybe about 10 to 20,000 new vehicles. So that tells you that we can't afford the new vehicle. If revenues are low, if incomes are low, the natural tendency is to go for a cheaper car. If you've got porous borders, if you've got officials who are either delaying your car at the ports and it's accruing demurrage, or you have to wait for ages before you can clear the car, then you've got another set of waits, for you to then license the car. Then you find that people will, we don't support it, but people will try and cut corners. And cutting corners will include, misregistering their vehicles so that they pay a lower amount. But it also extends to things like we ourselves as a country need to be honest and true to ourselves. Benin Republic, in the same year that the auto bill was launched in Nigeria, which took customs duty rate from about 22% to 70% in some instances.
According to Obieze Ekwesili, former Vice President, Africa Region at the World Bank, anyone who wants to tackle corruption must be willing to go all the way. There are no shortcuts. Extracts from a PwC report shows that corruption in Nigeria could cost up to 37% of gross domestic product (GDP) by 2030 if it is not dealt with immediately. This cost is equated to around $1,000 per person in 2014 and nearly $2,000 per person by 2030. The effect of this loss is felt throughout the country, from the private sector, defense and security, education and health, to mention a few, therefore making the country vulnerable to minor and significant shocks, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. Due to corruption, Nigeria's entrepreneurs and businesses suffer some of the highest costs of operations in Africa, resulting in stagnating and receding economic and developmental progress. Although the opportunities for growth and development in Nigeria and across Africa abound, the future of Nigeria as a stable, prosperous nation remains very uncertain due to the extreme levels of corruption in the public and private sectors. This is why the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, in collaboration with Center for International Private Enterprise, is hosting the first Africa Business Ethics Conference to hold in Nigeria, providing a platform for insightful and constructive deliberations about tackling corruption in Nigeria and in Africa as a continent. The theme for ABEC Nigeria 2020 is tackling corruption to reduce poverty, unemployment, and insecurity.
It is day 3 of the Africa Business Ethics Conference, ABEC 2020. And I say a big welcome to all of you. For those who might just be joining us for the very first time, it has been a 3-day event, and today is day 3, as I mentioned. For those who might just be joining us for the very first time, the Africa Business Ethics Conference 2020 is organized by the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry in collaboration with the Center for International Private Enterprise, CIPE. And as you saw from the last video that I just played before I came into the screen, this year's theme is aptly titled, Tackling Corruption to Reduce Poverty, Unemployment, and Insecurity. And what an event it has been. From day 1, we have been hearing and listening to wonderful speakers come on stage from their various locations, because of course this year's edition is a hybrid edition. We're doing a combination of a real-life setting here at the LCCI headquarters in Lagos, Nigeria, and of course virtually. So most of our speakers have spoken to us from their various virtual locations, and what an event it has been so far. If you've missed the 2 days that has happened, well, don't feel too despaired, because today's edition, the final day 3, promises to be equally impactful. I've been your host since the past 2 days. My name is William Tuzomba. I'm a media consultant with Connect Nigeria, and today's edition, as I said, promises to be engaging and eye-opening. Now, before we go into today's program proper, just as we've done for the past 2 days, I want to read out some of the VIPs that we shall be expecting, both as speakers today and also to give us some goodwill messages. First on my list, of course, is our guest of honor, who we definitely will be expecting will join us sometime much later today. And it's no other person than His Excellency Professor Yemi Osibanjo, GCO, and the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He will be joining us much later today. We're also going to be having Dr. Al-Bagher Alafi. He's the Chief Executive Officer, CASE, Sudan. We're also having Mr. Harun Sidat, Senior Consultant, Governance and Anti-Corruption, West Africa. We're also going to be having Miss Aisha Osori, Executive Director, Osiwa. Mr. Lars Benson, Regional Director for Africa, CIPE. He will also be joining us. Mr. Muhammad Ashiru Baba, FSI, FCAI, MNIM, Director, Education, Independent Corruption Practices and Other Offenses Commission, ICPC. Also, we'll be having Reverend Father Ehusani, Executive Director, Lux Terra Leadership Foundation, Ms. Fatma El Mawi, CEO, Milestones Resources, Nairobi, Kenya, and Mr. Richard Bystrong, CEO, Frontline Anti-Bribery, former FCPA violator and FBI UK cooperator. And finally, on my list for now is Chief Chris Okunowo, President, Chairman of Council, Institute of Directors, IOD. So these are some of the wonderful dignitaries we shall be expecting to grace today's occasion for us. Now, moving to today's agenda proper, just as I said, the past 2 days has been very engaging, and we want to continue to say a very special thank you to our chief host, the current president of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, in person of Mrs. Toki Mabogunje, who gave us our welcome address on day one. And I've also been informed that she most likely will also be present with us today or be represented by someone. Also bearing in mind that she also has some other engagement with some other events happening right about now. So moving on to today's program, right now we want to mention and remind you that the ABEC Ambassador Challenge has been concluded. Remember, I did mention yesterday that 14 companies entered for this challenge, and well, do I say fortunately or unfortunately, we're only able to get one of the companies to send all the required entry documents for evaluation. So sometime towards the end of today's program, when we shall be announcing the winners from the 3-minute pitch challenge, we're also going to be announcing the new ambassador for the APEC. The APEC Challenge ambassador will be announced at that point, the company that was selected based on the entry received. At this point in time, I would want us to now watch on our screens as we take the third part of the 3-phase video that we said from day one we'll be playing. We've played the first and the second. Today, at this point, we want to watch the third video titled Cost of Corruption, Part 3. So please give your undivided attention to the screen as the video will be playing.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Day 3 of Africa Business Ethics Conference 2020. As we conclude this event that will kickstart the needed change and transformation, let us bear in mind that today's focus shall be the building block of anti-corruption efforts that requires strong personal ethics. This discussion will focus on the interplay between personal ethics and the larger community.
Companies have left because they cannot operate here. I remember a few years ago, one of the big freight companies, an American company, had to leave because of the American corruption laws, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And I remember the newspaper article said, given the introduction of the FCPA in the US, which applies worldwide, they can no longer operate in Nigeria. That is an indictment on our country, that an international company that was doing good business in Nigeria, hiring hundreds of Nigerians, had to leave because they could see no way to operate in Nigeria and still keep to the letter of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. They have essentially told us that it is impossible.
Well, there are several reasons, because it's become systemic and it's almost becoming like a culture. And sometimes the efforts to address the issues are more cosmetic and do not go to the root of the problem. It's kind of, being institutionalized.
It's cheaper for you to import a car into Benin Republic and then drive it through a porous border. Interestingly, for about 3 years in the last maybe 6 years, Benin Republic has been importing more cars than the whole of Nigeria. And you ask yourself, we've got 11 million cars on the roads of Nigeria. I don't know what the population of Benin Republic is in total, but to import 200,000 to 300,000 vehicles into Benin Republic, you need to ask yourself the questions: where are those cars ending up? And if they're ending up in Nigeria, then there must be somebody or a group of people who are helping those cars that have bypassed, the borders and the border controls and paying duty, help them get the licenses. Because those cars would have come in without paying duty or without paying the correct duty, but they still got licensed. Somebody or a group of people are benefiting from it.
On the shipping side, a lot of shipping companies recycle their vessels, changing the names of the vessels after a number of years and bring them back in under temporary importation process without good records. Nigeria needs to liaise with the global body, the IMO and Lloyd's in London, and make sure that this stops. That calls NIMASA out. That calls the Customs Service out to address this specific, because Nigeria is losing a lot of revenue that would have been paid to government as full duty, and is rather made as a temporary importation. That is corruption against the government itself.
As we come to the end of this noble event, the SCCI is hosting this conference to develop a white paper for government, the private sector, and civil society organizations to learn more about how multi-stakeholder collaboration can effectively address the menace of corruption in the various spheres of the country's economic and developmental sectors. Therefore, urging the general public to look out for this white paper and never let this conversation leave the front burner. We must tackle the challenges and get plugged into the efforts to minimize corruption. It starts with us as individuals, then it flows into the society through our organizations, the public institutions, the civil society, and beyond.
Thank you very much for the video. Okay, right about now, I want to also read out some special guests that we are expected for today's program. On my list here, I have Mrs. Omowumi Gbadamosi, who ably spoke with us yesterday. She's the country director, Africa SIPE. She will be with us. We also have Mrs. Mojisola Bakare, who's a general manager for Sterling Bank and also a vice president here at the Lagos Chamber of Commerce. We're also going to be having Mr. Patrick Obat, Chairman Standard Chartered, Kenya. He was also one of our passionate speakers yesterday. We can't forget the wonderful delivery he gave us yesterday, and we can only say thank you, sir, for that passionate delivery on proper ethic behaviors in the workplace. Right about now, ladies and gentlemen, we want to move to the very first plenary for today, and it's titled 3 Lessons About Progress, Development, and Peace from Africa. Now, the anchor for this plenary, this first plenary today, is Dave Peterson, National Endowment for Democracy contributors, and to be joining him are the following individuals: Dr. Albagir Alafi, anti-corruption expert and CEO, CASE, Sudan; Harun Sidat, senior consultant, governance and anti-corruption, West Africa; and finally, Aisha Osori, executive director, Osiwa. These individuals will be part of the plenary that we're about to go into right now. So ladies and gentlemen, right about now, please make welcome as we invite all the panelists that will be part of this plenary that we're about to take, titled 3 Lessons About Progress, Development, and Peace from Africa. So I would like to welcome Mr. Dave to take over from this point and introduce all of them. Welcome, Mr. Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Amin. It's really a pleasure to join this. To moderate this panel.
Can you please help us check if there is some kind of interruption with your audio? We seem to be having this very distorted audio. I don't know if it's from your end or our end, but just help us check if there's no distortion in your audio setup.
Okay. How do I sign?
It's still very distorted.
I'm not sure what's happening.
Are you connected to more than one devices? It sounds as if there's an interruption, and most times that happens probably when you're connected to more than one devices and they are at very close proximity.
No, I only have one.
Okay, let's
okay.
Just a second. Let's see if the technical team can figure out what the problem is. It's really, the distortion is pretty loud, so it's.
I didn't have a problem in the that I've had.
Can any other person from the panel speak to us? Let's ascertain that the problem is.
Speak. I mean, I can hear you very clearly, but I can't hear Dave.
Yeah, same here. Same here.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear the moderator clearly, but I can't hear Dave.
So
Mr. Dave,
so Mr. Dave, the problem seems to be from your end because all the other panelists are loud and clear with us.
Yes, I'm not sure what to do.
Can you talk without the headphone that you're using? Can you disconnect the headphone and just click right into your laptop? Let's see. Okay, speak to us, sir.
Is that better?
Better. Perfect. We're good. We're good to go. We're good to go.
Well,
welcome. You have the floor, sir, so go ahead.
Great, that's a relief. Well, like I say, it's a pleasure to be moderating this panel this morning. The panelists are all known to me in one fashion or another. You know, we've got a very broad topic, very challenging. I think we're looking at the big picture to conclude the conference. You know, the progress, development, and peace. I think what we would like to get out of this discussion this morning is some ideas about, in the struggle against corruption, how we might go forward. And so Dr. Al-Bakir Afif Mukhtar from Sudan has a very rich experience in the struggle for democracy and human rights in Sudan. He's is a leader of CASE and another organization, TRAC. He has often put his life on the line. He spent some time in prison, but today he tells me that he's actually being given an office in the foreign ministry to you know, do his work. I think that's a testimony to the dramatic change that has just occurred in Sudan in the last year or two. But there's still some very enormous challenges that remain in Sudan, and the fight against corruption in particular, I think, is one that Dr. Al-Bakir will give us some insights into, and how an entire nation can address these very fundamental problems. Next, we have Haroon Sadat, who, again, I've had some contact with over the many years that he's been running SIPE's program in out of Mauritania. There, he's been able to look at the problems of democracy and business development across the Sahel. Clearly, there is a lot to learn in terms of the problem of corruption and the fight against instability and the terrorism that has afflicted the Sahel. And then I'm just delighted that Aisha Ashouri is wrapped up this panel. Aisha, of course, is the director of OSIWA, the Open Society Institute for West Africa, that, like my foundation, the National Endowment for Democracy, provides resources to support civil society organizations generally that are working for democracy, human rights, and a more open society. But I also know Aisha in her former capacity as the head of the Federation of Nigerian Women, where she did some just excellent work in promoting the rights of Nigerian women, the political involvement. Of course, she's written a really one of the best books, I think, on Nigerian politics that I've ever been able to read. I'm trying to remember the name now.
Love does not win elections.
That's it. Love does not win elections. So I think that sums it up. She'll give us a perspective, I think, on some of the political challenges that are involved with the fight against corruption across Africa. So I think with that brief introduction, I'm told the sound is still not very good, but I guess the panelists who you really want to listen to this morning anyway. So I will hand it over to Dr. Al-Bakir to start us off.
Oh, thanks, Dave. And I'm pleased to be here. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be in this panel and also just to share with you our experience in Sudan, which is quite unique these days. Probably you all heard about the great Sudanese revolutions and nonviolent protests that continued day and night from December 19th, 2018 until the day Bashir was deposed on April the 11th of 11th of April 2019. And I think this revolution, in one way of readings, is also about fighting corruption. Because the Bashir regime is a corrupt, or was a corrupt regime from head to toe. And the president of the state is a corrupt person. He took bribes and he put money, millions of dollars and euros in his bedroom, and it was found there. I mean, this is a fact. So, and all the officials, I mean, in the past 30 years, corruption has trickled down from the head of state until it reached every person who could find a way to extract money from whatever he has or she has, whether it is an office, it is a service provision or whatever, if it is a policeman or a policewoman, everything, they just had to get some money. And this, of course, led to the impoverishment of of the country, and we had a high level of poverty. The economy was collapsing, and still we suffer from that. Education collapsed. All services, health is being privatized. The education is being privatized. The state simply took her hands off of anything that provide for the people, and abdicate its job, and in the end we had to really get to the streets and get rid of the whole thing, and we paid a lot. I mean, Bashir, one thing that he did was simply to turn to produce and create tens of security apparatuses and militias and tribal militias, and so they started, you know, to kill people and to intimidate, try to intimidate the Sudanese people. But finally, we are able to get rid of the regime. Now we are in a very fragile transitional period since the start of this transitional government in August 2019, and the transition is slowly, you know, we are slowly trying to wade ourselves from an entrenched 30-year-old kleptocracy to a long dreamed of democracy and rule of law. Sudan's transition carries both the traits of the old regime and the new dream. It is a compromise between the power of the people, that I would say, and the power of the gun. The military and the militias, they have the guns, of course, and so it is the balance between the elements of the old regime, especially the security, the police, the military, and the militias, which are all represented by what was called the Transitional Military Council, or TMC, and representatives of the Great December Revolution, which is represented by something called the Forces of Freedom and Change, FFC. So it is a dynamic that this transitional government now is a combination of both. We had, of course, to reach a compromise in order to avoid bloodshed, of course. This is why I'm saying that this period in Sudan is very unique, because you can visibly see these two contradictory powers struggling, you know, and creating this dynamic between the military and the Madaniya. The Madaniya means the civilian governance. And of course, Madaniya was one of the greatest slogans of our revolution. So we wanted to get rid of the military, and it has proven beyond any shred of doubt that the military are no good for any governance. And there are, you know, the military ruled Sudan most of its independent era. I think 3/4 of the time was we were under this military rule. So the Madaniya became one, or the civilian rule became one of the greatest slogan of our revolution. But I mentioned the relationship between the revolution and the corruption of the regime. When al-Bashir regime took over power in 1989, they started by corrupting the established institution of the state, whether it is in the security sector, that is the army and the security proper and the police, or the civil service, or the judiciary, or education system like universities and schools, or the media and civil society. They tried to corrupt all these elements of the state. So they purged hundreds of thousands of qualified people in all the government's institutions. One of the biggest remaining assets of the state built by the British colonials in Sudan is the civil service. It used to be the pride of our country. Clean, professional, with very minimal corruption, and that was until 1989. So this en masse purge of civil service and the other military institutes as well took place. The very thing that the regime has done since they came in 1989. So the vast majority of these people who were purged en masse, they were people who have been recruited on the basis of efficiency, transparency, and objective criteria such as merit, equity, and aptitude. The vast majority of these were purged en masse, and in their place, the government installed unqualified loyalists, as well as thousands of Islamists from the other Arab countries. They all came to Sudan in order, the main thing on this mass purge of the state is that, they said this is the colonial state. So they wanted to get rid of the colonial state and to build in its place the Islamic, quote unquote, state. So this was the first thing, I call it the corrupting the established institutions in the state. So then after that, they started to institutionalize corruption. First, they corrupt the institutions, then they institutionalized corruption. So how did they do that? How did the government institutionalize corruption? They did it by adopting 3 policies using 3 different words. The first one, all these words are in Arabic and I will explain them. The first one is tamkeen. And the second word is, or policy is called tajnib. And the third is called tahallul. Okay, let's start with the first one, tamkeen. Tamkeen, in the literal meaning of the word tamkeen is empowerment. Empowerment is a good word, of course, but here, what do they mean by that? As a term, it means purging from the civil service and the army and the police and the security of all the elements they deemed not loyal to them, and to put in their place party members, supporters, and cronies. This included all key positions in the public and private sectors of the state. This is tamkeen. This is what the first thing they did. Second, tajnib. Tajnib literally means putting something aside, usually money, gold, or the like. And as a term, tajnib means outside the reach of government's money controlling mechanisms, which means, not to give if an entity, whether it is in the public or private sector, that is given the power of tajnib, the policy, they don't give their revenues, they don't hand the revenues or reveal information about these revenues to the Bank of Sudan or to the military, to the Ministry of Finance. So they control money, they run money outside of the government or the state institutions that are supposed to control and supervise the movement of money in the country. For instance, the revenues of public and private companies and ministries, such as the electricity company or the Ministry of Energy and Minerals, did not reveal their accounts to the general auditor for many, many years on end. Every year, the general auditor listed the companies and government entities that refused to allow his team to look into their books. In 2012, the amount of money outside the control of the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank of Sudan was estimated as 1/3 of the total GDP. This is 2012. Look at 2020 now. The Prime Minister of the transitional government, Dr. Abdullah Hamdouk, he said that 82% of our GDP has been and still is circulating outside the control of government. He said Ministry of Finance only controls 18% of the general GDP of the country. Yep.
Your discussion of the problem of corruption in Sudan is, I think, very compelling and interesting. But I think we have two other panelists that also need some time to talk about their issues. And so perhaps if you could quickly...
Sorry for that.
We'll come back to talk, I think, more too about how things have changed in Sudan and what is being done to fight the corruption.
Yeah, yes. I'm sorry for that because I had to... I realized that I had to ask how much time I have, but I can stop here. Anyway, you have an idea now. In what comes, probably I would just say a few words about what is being done until now. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for that.
Not at all, Abakir. It was very interesting. Haroon, can you take us through the problem of corruption in the Sahel and some solutions that you're working on?
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be with such a knowledgeable team on this panel, and seeing some of the senior people and really having a perspective, historical perspective. It's always very enriching. In the Sahel, we have a situation that basically is very similar initially to what Dr. Bakir has just mentioned about the militarization of the systems. In fact, all the countries were led by military type regimes all the way to probably the early 90s when there was a big wave of democratic requirement. It's very important to understand that democracy was not a demand from the grassroots. Democracy was a demand from the international community. Therefore, there is no ownership of that process at the local level during the 90s. So many countries have basically shifted the military gears to civilian gears, and while the control remained to be military control, the military people who basically retired from the military or decided to leave, at least to symbolically leave the military, were put in charge to please the international community, especially the donor community that is actually funding many of our states. We think that in the Sahel, what has happened, and maybe it is the same in many countries in Africa, but what has happened is that as this democracy, symbolic democracy, started in the 90s, I would say probably around the early 2000s, people with the globalization and with the access to information, and maybe even some consequences of poverty that led to the rural exodus to the cities, people have started to basically get a little bit more understanding of the process and understanding of what is a little bit behind. And so we have been seeing a little bit of a shift, not so much in the system itself in terms of the regime, but in the mindset of people. So I would say that emotionally or mentally, there is a transitional phase for a real demand, a real democratic demand from the people. With the education level being the way it is, and a lot of the challenges, many people are still very unclear and very much sensitive to counter messaging and counter rhetorics. And that vulnerability, unfortunately, in the Sahel particularly creates a big issue. Because anytime there is a rejection of the system, a rejection of their understanding of democracy or their understanding of what is happening, there is an immediate rejection of the Western support, which is basically supporting that system. So democracy is starting to become a little bit more of a bad word, in the sense that it is a Western concept. And because it's a Western concept, corruption being part of what they're seeing as democracy, because democracy is not understood in its theoretical concept, it's understood in its implementation. So the way they are seeing democracy, what is being called democracy on the ground, they're seeing it as a way to enrich illegally people, to drive international donors' money into the very few, to abandon, and this is very important because this is a sentiment that we've seen in Mali, we're seeing now in Burkina Faso and Niger. We are seeing that many people see that the state is abandoning areas of their country because basically they don't have either the means or the interest. And so this manifestation of democracy is being seen as democracy. And so everybody in the very, very vulnerable areas are basically starting to reject the concept of democracy, associating democracy with corruption and trying to find out what other alternatives exist. And that is what exactly the extremist and terrorist groups are using. They're basically providing, at least on a theoretical level, they're providing an alternative. They're basically saying these regimes are being promoted by international donors, Western donors. They're promoted by the Western powers. Western powers are willing to implement democracy and anti-corruption and the right system in their countries, but they're not willing to implement it in your countries. Therefore, you need to find a way to reject and join the groups that will stand with you and stand with the right approach. And that right approach, the term right is very important, because right is now, it becomes a theological term. So the right here is what goes in heaven and hell, and what is Islamic and non-Islamic, and what is bad and what is good. And therefore, many people in our countries have an empathy and have some sort of a support to these groups, and a rejection to the government because of this. So corruption is having a deep consequence in our countries, because it's at the heart of what is happening in many countries. And let me just take very quickly, so that I don't take a lot of time, the example of Mali. If we look today at how much money the international community, how much resources in terms of natural resources is actually declared to be paid to support Mali, and we look directly to the level of poverty and the increase of the incidence, that means the gap, the poverty gap, you have an illogical analysis. You cannot understand how that's possible. And the only thing that is logical is if you look at how much money Mali has gotten and how much potential Mali has, and you have the level of poverty, the only logical thing that you have is to see the increase of instability, because there is clearly something that is wrong. Now, that instability is in Bamako, is an instability typically like what happened in Sudan. They overcome the last president, Keita, by a revolution, basically by people actually standing in the street for many months to get the president out. But in fact, when you go outside of Bamako, the revolution or the contestation is taking a different format. The format that is taken is a format that is going back to traditional, going back to religious roots, going back to tribal roots, going back to ethnic roots. And there is a deepening divide and a deepening conflict that is happening within our countries, whether it's Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Burkina Faso, Chad, Nigeria, and Cameroon. There is a growing and deepening divide that is ethnical and that is chaotic for these countries. And it's basically caused by the lack of proper governance, the lack of accountability of these governments. And so I just wanted to put in perspective that we are no longer talking about democracy and the promotion of democracy. We're actually talking about the possibility of failing states and the possibility of complete chaos in our country because of not the incapacity, but the refusal, the rejection by the leaders to actually implement and protect the good governance practices. I'll stop here, and maybe we can take questions as we go around.
Thank you very much for that. That was really quite a lucid description of the problems in the Sahel, and I find it very interesting, the contradiction in the sense between what you and Dr. Al-Bakir were describing, where in the case of Sudan, you had a military Islamist dictatorship that was fostering the corruption. And in the case of the Sahel, you have leaders who were ostensibly sort of following the West's dictates to create a democracy, and yet because of the corruption of these so-called democratic leaders, they have discredited and fueled the sort of Islamist or jihadist ideology in the fight against corruption there. So very, very interesting. Yisha, I'm leaving the best for last here. I'm sure you have some very interesting perspectives to give us on corruption and the link to progress and development and peace.
Hello, Mr. Dave.
So thank you, Dave.
It's all yours.
Thank you for the introduction, and just say good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I'm really grateful to come in third or last, depending on how you want to frame it. Dr. Al-Bakir and Haroon have painted a very vivid picture of what we're dealing with, not just in West Africa and the Sudan, but across the continent. And I think it's they've set the scene perfectly for my intervention today. And in terms of thinking about how I would best complement them in the time that I have today, I thought I would just divide my comments or my presentation and thoughts into two, which is one, start with what OSIWA is doing, which again speaks to the scene that Dr. Al-Bakir and Haroon have set just in terms of the chaos that's coming, the state of Africa, the lack of governance, and really what is most striking, the complete lack of political will. So I'll start with what organizations such as OSIWA that I work for are doing in the field to try and basically stem the tide, and then end with my thoughts about what's the problem with the political will, which we can see that whether it's a military dictatorship as we've seen in Sudan, or whether it's faux democracies as we're seeing in Burkina Faso, Mali, Nigeria, and many other countries, Tanzania, the effects are the same. We're getting less and less value in terms of governance. So for me, the core of my contribution today is that the role of the state is central to progress, development, and peace. And implicit in this is that the social contract between those in government and the people who delegate their governing powers to the government is weak, and that the competence of the state as embodied by the people who manage it is also weak, which speaks to the lack of governance, which is the same across the Sahel and Nigeria. And third, that the values of the state, which are made up of culture, beliefs, and state ethics and culture, is also weak. Now, where have organizations such as USIWA come in? We've tried to strengthen these three areas in terms of trying to make sure we have more responsible and more responsive states. So I'll run through very quickly just 4 things, for example, that we've spent our time and money on in the last 6 to 8 years in the West Africa region. The first is strengthening regulatory frameworks which promote transparency. So we're talking about the typical whistleblower rules, support for anti-corruption institutes. So for example, in Senegal in 2012, as a result of the work that we've done with many of our partners, we've seen the adoption of a lot of legal and regulatory rules, including the adoption of transparency codes in the management of public finances in 2012, the passage of an Asset Declaration Act in 2014, which covered all government and public officials who managed any budgets that were equal to and beyond 1 billion CFA. Senegal also created an anti-corruption and fraud body, which had the powers to take legal action. So all these developments yielded at least some positive results in terms of governance frameworks for managing public resources. And this saw Senegal's position move from, in Transparency International's ranking, move from the 112th position in 2012 to 61st in 2015. Unfortunately, if you look now for 2019, Senegal was down now 5 places to the 66th position. So that's the first thing we've done, trying to just across board strengthen regulatory frameworks. They don't work perfectly, but at least they're there for those who have the will and the interest to push them. The second thing we've done is support regional campaigns, such as the Publish What You Pay Coalition, which we've supported from its inception. And we've used that trying to make sure there's a lot more transparency around extractive industries and transparency initiative norms. This is because across West Africa, many of our governments rely on natural resources, and which is basically rent-free money, which makes it possible to explain the kind of situation that Dr. Al-Bakir explained in Sudan, where people were sort of encouraged not to pay taxes and hide money, because literally the government doesn't sort of need your money. They have natural resources to tap into illegally and not account for. So we're very proud that after this couple of years of pushing transparency initiatives, making sure that we're protecting local communities of the consequences of mining operations, making sure that women in mining are also protected. We've gotten one latest big win that I'm happy to share. From next month, January 2021, all EITI countries, including Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, Mali, Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia, will have to publish all their mining contracts and add-on agreements. This is a big transparency win against opacity and secrecy that we're used to. The third thing we've tried to support is also investigative journalism. As we all know, the media is severely underfunded in many of our countries. They are usually typically owned by politicians, whether of the military variety or the for democracy type, but basically finding investigative journalists and independent platforms to share the type of news and to spend the type of time and resources that we need to make sure that we're exposing what people in government are doing is very, very rare. So we've done a lot to support that with some of our partners, including Norbert Zongo Center for Investigative Journalism in West Africa. This collaboration that we've had with them and with organizations such as Premium Times in Nigeria has yielded the West African leaks, and we had worked on also the Panama Papers and the Swiss leaks, and even recently the Luanda leaks. All this helps to expose and just creates more transparency around what's going on. And we've found that some of what we've actually unveiled with some of the work of our partners has resulted in helping to identify strategies that we can adapt to make sure that make it harder for these tax havens where some of our elites take their money to, especially those in politics and those in public office. And then the fourth thing we've done is engaging the public. We've done this in many ways, including support for children's books in Liberia, including trying to revise education curriculums with partners in Mali, just to make sure that younger generations are more aware, more in tune of what corruption is like, how insidious it is, and how it sort of permeates through actually every sector of life, from health to education to getting your driver's license and getting your passport. Just everything you do that's involved with the state can become an area for corruption. So we've done that through music as well, through theater and other art forms, and try to engage the wider public. Now, why is this engagement of the wider public in the conversation around anti-corruption important? Because it builds knowledge, and we all know that knowledge is power. When we have a more aware, more engaged, even if they're not doing anything about it, the fact that they know what's going on, they have the numbers, they know the issues, it makes it easier when we have organic movements such as the EndSARS movement that took place a few months ago between, I think, November, mostly November into October into November. It makes it easy for organic movements to build power, because you now have millions of people who have been hearing this type of thing for a long time, who know the numbers, who've been hearing about the effects of corruption in the police, who can now join the campaign, support the campaign in different ways. Because at the heart of it, EndSARS movement was an anti-corruption campaign. It was a campaign seeking for the end of corruption and mismanagement of the police force, which triggers the exploitative mindset where underpaid policemen with guns feel emboldened to rob and kill citizens. The call to end police brutality is also an anti-corruption campaign, because the inability to hold the state accountable is a form of corruption. And at the height of the EndSARS movement, I'm not sure how many people knew, but we could also see that ending police brutality was also trending in places as far as Angola and Uganda at the same time. And let's not forget, of course, in May to June and most of the summer, the United States were gripped in long-standing campaign to end police brutality with the death of George Floyd. So that's the context in which we could be looking at engaging the public. And as we know for sure that when you talk about police brutality and the use of state security to to oppress citizens, especially citizens concerned, usually tied to the effects of corruption. You know, typically when you see citizens say enough is enough, we're fed up, it's usually tied somehow to a corrupt state, an unresponsive state, a state that's unable to govern anymore, which is what we saw in Mali earlier this year. So now, OSIWA is obviously not alone in this field. We're not the only donors who put money into anti-corruption. Billions have probably been spent on the continent when you put that all the money together. But our states are still weak, still suboptimal. We're still unable to hold those in office accountable in terms of public service delivery and account. So why? What exactly is the issue? And I was really happy when Haroon mentioned, he said refusal. He said they just refuse to do what they're supposed to. And I captured that as the lack of political will. So, but why don't they have any political will? Why do they want to stay in power? So of course, this is tied to state capture and how those who get into government have begun, how being in government in Africa largely has become a place to become fantastically wealthy, to leave generational wealth for your family. And it's almost become an industry where going into politics becomes a family business. And I thought that I could end my thoughts or my discussion with a few thoughts that I'd learned, just 3 quick lessons that I learned when I tried to get a party ticket to be a legislator in Nigeria in 2014. That's the book, that's the experience I captured in the book, Love Does Not Win Elections, that Dave mentioned when he was introducing me. And the 3 lessons are really, who is in politics is everything. That's the first one. And what it means is that me and you, all this, I know there were over 100 people, 114, maybe 15 people having this conversation today virtually. Most of us are not in political parties. And as I said, who is in politics is everything. So we're not there. We're the ones who know, who are educated, but we're not involved in the politics. We're not there. And what we need to do now to change things is actually begin to be more deliberate about how we engage with politics, to join it, join the parties, to teach politics to our children in our institutes, to create a sense of values and ethics that's tied to politics. The same way we encourage our young ones to read engineering and medicine and law It's the same way we should be talking about being part of politics and the political process. The second thing for me that I learned was also that the political party as a leadership recruitment tool is broken. This is a direct result of what you put in is what you get out. So again, it speaks to what I said about who is in politics is everything. So if you have politics as a field that's filled with people who, for lack of a better way to put it, are not productive members of society. I mean, when I started to engage with my party members in Abuja, which Abuja is the capital, let's not forget. It's not exactly the villages. There's grassroots areas, but it's still largely what's city-like, city dwelling. So even though I had delegates who are far away, and you could say those are grassroots, they're not the predominant, they're not the majority. But I still found that I was engaging with delegates who, whether in my capacity in the private sector or my capacity at that time in civil society, I wouldn't hire these people for anything higher than maybe the most menial jobs. But here, they were the delegates who were going to decide who would become president. How is that possible? And then when you also look at the political party as a tool for state capture, because many of our political parties are not self-funding, they don't generate any money. They're not interested in mobilizing me and you. They're not interested in trying to get us to join and pay dues, socializing anybody about ethics and values and what it means to be a citizen in their countries. They're only designed to be platforms to win power and getting there and loot. And then the third thing I learned was that the structures are definitely not going to change by themselves. The truth is, what we have right now in many of our countries in terms of the political culture and ethos is deliberate, is designed to extract and exploit. And if we want that to change, we are also going to have to replace that system. The system is not going to give up on itself. No oppressive system does that. We're going to have to be deliberate about building an alternative structure and putting that in place. And it's really good to hear that many young people, I think, the youth are our future, are already thinking that way, already rejecting the traditional types of politics, the traditional types of organizing, as we saw with NSAS a few months ago. So that's where, for me, the hope lies in terms of trying to get those with the right political will, the right values and ethos back into government. Thank you.
Wow, that was really terrific, Aisha. Thank you. You've given us a few ideas about how corruption can be fought, and I think your concept of the problem in politics and how it's so fundamental to change in addressing the problem of corruption is really key here, I think. I don't know how much time we have left for discussion. I see there are a number of questions that have come in. I think maybe I would like to just ask a quick round of questions for all the panelists, and if we have time, then take the questions from the audience. But you know, for Abakir and Haroon, you've heard some of Aisha's ideas. I mean, hello, how do those?
Hello, Mr. Dave. Can I put in? Sorry to interrupt you, sir. You have,
okay, maybe we're out of time.
Have about 2 minutes exactly to wrap up because your time is already up. So please beg your indulgence. 2 minutes.
Okay, that's too bad.
Thank you.
Well, I guess that just it gives me a little time to summarize then the contributions that our panelists have made this morning. It really was not enough time to dig into these issues, but you know, I think that clearly in the case of Sudan, the political change there has created the opportunity to remove the structures that were responsible for so much of the corruption there. And so it's a very hopeful time in Sudan, I think, but the challenge is enormous. Across the Sahel, I think Haroon has made a very compelling case for the challenge democracy that corruption presents, and not just democracy, but peace in terms of the feeling by the population that their leaders are corrupt, and that the only way to confront it is by rebellion. And then, finally, as I said, Ayesha, Harun makes the good remark that the system was always corrupt. I think as Ayesha was suggesting, I think NSARS is a very good example of the sort of popular movements that can demand the change. As she said, the political parties, the systems are not going to change willingly on their own. They really need that popular pressure and the new tools that we have today that, as she was suggesting, whether it's investigative journalism, the social media, is communicating ideas. And so, I think that we're just at the beginning of this struggle, even though millions of dollars has been poured into it over many years. I think that we're finally getting to the point where there's some light at the end of the tunnel. And so I congratulate SIPE for pulling this conference together, and I think that we're on the right track. So thank you very much for this.
Okay. Please, can we give Mr. Dave and his team a round of applause from those of us here live? Thank you very much, Mr. Dave. So we're saying a very special thank you to Mr. Dave Peterson, National Endowment for Democracy contributors. And also we're saying a very special thank you to Dr. Albagir Alafi, anti-corruption expert and CEO Case Sudan. And also Harun Sidat, Senior Consultant Governance and Anti-Corruption West Africa. And finally, the only woman in the park, very important individual in the park, Aisha Otori, Executive Director, for that wonderful discussion. We say a very big thank you to you all. Thank you very much. And why that discussion, viewers, by so doing, also strip them of all properties and funds acquired during the process. Mr. Apatasin, Peter, made that contribution. So we say thank you for your contribution, sir. And for those questions that came in, maybe after, before the end of today's event, or even long after today's event, we will definitely provide answers to every single questions that come in online. So those who send in those questions, be rest assured that your questions will get answers, if not today, even after the event is over, because this subject matter is an ongoing discussion. It doesn't end with just this event. It's a stakeholder discussion that would continue long after the event is over. Now, ladies and gentlemen, moving along, we're going to the second plenary, which is going to be another interesting one that has the subject matter. The building blocks of anti-corruption efforts require strong personal ethics. This discussion will focus on the interplay between personal ethics and the larger community. And the anchor for this plenary will be Mr. Lars Benson, Regional Director for Africa, SIPE, and the presenter will be Mr. Mohamed Ashiru Baba, Director, Education, Independent Corruption Practices and Other Offenses Commission, ICPC. And those that will be joining in this plenary includes the following names: Oluwadare A. Kolawole, Deputy Director of Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, Reverend Peter Ehusani, Fatma El-Mawi, CEO, Milestones Resources, Nairobi, Kenya, Richard Bystrong, CEO, Frontline Anti-Bribery, former FCPA violator and FBI UK cooperator. And finally, to join this panel list is Chief Chris Okunowo, President, Chairman of Council, Institute of Directors, IOD. Okay, I've been told that the name is, one of the panelists' name is Reverend Father George Ehusani, will be part of this list. So right about now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to hand over to the anchor for this plenary session in person of Mr. Lars Benson, Regional Director for Africa, SIPE. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome all of you to this final session of the Africa Business Ethics Conference. This plenary will focus on the roles, the responsibilities, and behavior that each of us as individuals must play in the fight against corruption. Corruption is manifested by the priority given to oneself over others, over egoism, over altruism, of personal over collective benefit. By the end of this session, we will be inspired by a panel of great speakers with practical steps and advice on how we as individuals can improve, what we can do in our businesses, and how to work with others to reduce opportunities for corruption. As we have heard over the past 2 days, anti-corruption is all about changing behavior. Each of us has an individual responsibility to do the right thing. We have a family responsibility to teach and demonstrate the right values to our children. And we have a community responsibility to do the right thing when no one is looking. But what is the right thing? Some of the core ethical values we hear about include trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. As individuals, we need to demonstrate this at home, at work, and in our communities. For each of us, this is a personal journey of defining what is ethical and how to act with integrity. We will be challenged, perhaps daily. We will frequently fail, but hopefully we can learn from our own experiences and those of others and do better next time. We are not born with a good understanding of ethics and personal integrity. These are learned over time. Today, it is with a great pleasure that I would like to introduce you to a fantastic panel that will share with us some of their own personal stories and ethical challenges, but also provide all of us with recommendations about what each of us can do as individuals in our business, working with other government and NGOs so that we can change behavior to become all individual leaders in the fight against corruption. The panel today includes Reverend Father George Ehusani. He's the Executive Director for Lux Terra Leadership Foundation. We as well have Richard Bystrong, the CEO of Frontline Anti-Bribery LLC, former FCPA violator and FBI UK cooperator. We also have Oluwadare Kolawole, and forgive me for mispronouncing anybody's name, the Deputy Director for the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP. Clearly we have Fatma El-Mawi, the CEO of Milestones from Nairobi, Kenya. And we have as well the pleasure of having Mr. Mohammed Ashiru Baba, the Director of Education Independent Corrupt Practices Commission, ICPC. As the moderator, I'll call on each of you to give everyone a brief 7 minutes introductory remarks so that we will have sufficient time for questions and answers. As your time approaches, I'll turn on my video to remind you that you will need to wrap up. So for the first panelist today, let's turn to the Reverend Father. Reverend Father is a writer and speaker on public affairs of Nigeria for over 30 years, contributing numerous pieces in the field of social ethics and a strong advocate for a need to change in the public and private sector. Dear Reverend Father, could you start us off by telling us what you believe are the most important ethical values and how we can practice these as individuals in business and in government.
Thank you very much. And I congratulate the organizers, ABEC and CIPE and all the agencies that have put this together. Congratulations. Indeed, we need a conversation on ethics in order to make some impact on what has been described in the last 3 days as the lack of ethical governance and ethical business all over Africa. And this morning we have just heard about West Africa and what is going on. Now, Mr. Benzi has just begun by giving us what is constituted of ethics. Integrity, for example, character. We speak of being, I am a person of integrity. What does it involve? What it entails is that my values and my concrete behavior are in sync. There is no dissonance between the values I profess to have and my concrete behavior. Now, a lot of people fail in this. A lot of people in our society are not people of integrity because they profess certain values, and when they behave, their concrete behavior is not in sync, it's in dissonance. Now, why is that? And what must we do in order to help raise a population of people that have high ethical values, meaning for whom integrity is important, for whom character means a lot, for whom legacy building means a lot? What we have in our society, I just recently went again to revise Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When people appear to be still on the lower level of the hierarchy of needs, on the physiological level, on the level of security, if people are not yet able to move beyond physiological needs, the need for food, for electricity, for whatever, then security. When they don't move beyond that and they are still at that lower level like lower animals, then it is grab, which is why they call kind of greed we have in our society as primitive greed. Now, we need to help people to recognize that human evolution has raised us to a certain level where we get our meaning and our worth from what we contribute to make the life of others better. So people need to recognize that my happiness should be on account of how I have helped others to become better, how I have helped a larger number of people to be happy, to overcome poverty, to overcome illness, to overcome ignorance. That is what should make me happy. That is what should make me fulfilled. But what we have in our society often is a situation where people appear to be happy when they push others down in the ladder of poverty, and they alone are on top. In the Nigerian society, we have the misnomer called I pass my neighbor. I better pass my neighbor, meaning I am better than my neighbor, therefore I rejoice, as if I get my worth and my sense of purpose and meaning from the extent to which I am bigger, quote unquote, bigger than my neighbor. It is a misnomer, and I say it is actually a metaphor for our social pathology. So what must we do in this sea of problems of poverty, of mass corruption, monumental corruption? A lot of the earlier speakers have identified the problem. That one is that we have not nurtured true patriotism, the concept of the common good, which was very rife in the African community before colonialism. We have almost completely lost it. We have no sense of I am because we are. That my worth, my dignity, my sense of meaning should come from how much the others in the community have been lifted up. This crass individualism is a major cause of the problem that we have today. We need to work against this crass individualism. We need to work against this selfishness, this tunnel vision, to imagine that my security can be ensured when I have high walls and iron fences and my neighbors are living in the slum. I keep saying that islands of wealth and affluence amidst a sea of poverty is not possible. It's not acceptable in nature. Therefore, we need to, as people have said, from elementary school, from the family, we need to begin to critique the values, because society replicates the values that we project. Who are those that when the child is growing up, he sees that the parents bow to and respect? If they are people who have money, however they made the money, if they are not the people who are doing things for community, headmasters in the village, the community policeman, the people who are supporting security and welfare in the community, they are not the ones that are respected. They are the people who made money, no matter how they made the money. If that is the situation, then we are not likely to move away from the present situation much. Meaning that from the time a child is growing up, the child must be made to see, the parents must reflect the values that we are talking about, that the parents respect the local headmaster, in the local teacher in the village, because of what the teacher contributes to the community, that they respect the local policeman because of what he contributes to the community, that they respect the local religious leader, not because he's a celebrity religious leader or rich religious leader, but because of what he contributes to the community. When the child sees all those, then the child is likely to imbibe the values that are communitarian, values that promote the common good. We need to begin to raise children that way, and then we need to begin to work on our media. Right now, where we have free media, new media, where everybody is a broadcaster, and when you check the social media, the kind of values that are traded, the kind of socialization that is going on in a lot of our traditional and modern media are who is rich, who is making the millions, who is the biggest popular person, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, these are not the things that make people happy. At the end of the day, what really makes people happy is how much they contribute to bringing others out of suffering. So the local nurse, the local midwife who succeeds in helping a poor woman deliver safely, the local person who succeeds in protecting a widow, and so on, they are the happier persons, because that happiness is long-standing. The one who wins the $10 million lottery may experience pleasure for a moment, but he can be depressed tomorrow, he can be on drugs tomorrow because he's not happy. So we need to begin to teach this to our people, so that from elementary level, from infancy to graduate level, they can recognize, even in the choosing of what professions they would like to have in life, they can choose, they make the kind of choices that will lead to happiness, rather than just the kind of choices that will lead to pleasure, which is what is going on today, and it is not helping our society in terms of values and ethics. Now, let me conclude by saying it is on the individual level. I agree that it is the ethics of the individual, the sense of integrity of the individual, a life built on certain structures, moral structures, ethical structures of the individual that approximate to make up the ethics of the society. And it is then that people go into business and are ready to cut corners because he or she is not standing on solid ethical values. So we need to promote those values at the elementary level, those values in the family, those values in the university, help young people to recognize the difference between, I will insist, the difference between pleasure and joy and true happiness, and help people, push people towards seeking joy and lasting happiness than just seeking more and more pleasure, which comes via money and popularity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Father. Now we will turn to Richard Bistrong. Richard Bistrong is spent much of his career as an international sales executive in the defense sector and currently consults, writes, and speaks on foreign bribery and compliance issues from that frontline perspective. Richard's experience includes his role as the Vice President of International Sales for a large publicly traded manufacturer of police and military equipment, which required his residing and working in the UK. For well over 10 years, Richard traveled overseas in his sales responsibilities for approximately 250 days per year. Richard, to start us off, on your journey from corruption to compliance, what do you think are the most important elements to help people take personal responsibility in the fight for integrity.
Well, thank you, Lars, for the introduction. To the Reverend Father, what a wonderful way to start this discussion. That was such an inspiring talk. So, Lars, once again, thank you, and to everyone at the Africa Business Ethics Conference community, including all of the supporters, for the honor to join you here today. I really look forward to the day where I can visit Nigeria again and to share my journey from corruption to compliance in person. So what a pleasure it is to be a part of this session on personal ethics as building blocks of anti-corruption efforts. So what do I think are the most important elements for everyone as individuals to make a positive contribution to tackling corruption in Africa? Well, I'm going to use a very special book to share my thoughts on this, and I'm going to hold it up for a minute. It's by an author, Mary Gentile, and it's called Giving Voice to Values. It's not a very thick book. It is a wonderful read and a roadmap to what I'm going to share, well, this morning from my home outside here in New York City. So the Giving Voice to Values can really help us to build pillars to make principled and strong ethical decisions in what's a very complex world, so that we never feel like we have to sacrifice integrity to succeed. And I also want to thank Professor Abiola Makinwa, who has her law degree from the University of Lagos and is now a principal lecturer at the Hague University of Applied Sciences, for her contribution to this field and discussion as well. So I think for the business leaders here today, you all have such a powerful and an incredible role in tackling corruption, both by the power of your voice and the example that you set for your workforce, society, and the larger African business community. So where do we start as to spark behavioral change in this fight against corruption, what the Reverend Father spoke about? I think that first we need to think about, well, what are the alternatives to corruption? And to think about the power of those alternatives over the power and the pressures of the moment. And to think about the wider ethical consequences of our decisions upon society at large, among our community, and also including our family and networks of loved ones who are counting on us to do what's right for their well-being and future each and every day. Yes, there are always alternative paths to success other than to be a part of a corrupt system. But we need to think about these challenges. We need to be open about them and talk about them if we want to change behaviors. And it starts with everyone as individuals as to spark long-term change. So here are a few things to think about as I reflect on my own journey from former Richard to current Richard in this journey from corruption to compliance. So first, let's talk about values. Values are the core beliefs that shape our attitudes and actions. Our values represent who we are as human beings. We all have personal values, but in addition to these personal values, we also have values, well, that we all share, right? For example, equality, justice, honesty. The challenge is, how do we make sure that we're acting on our values, which we know are going to come under pressure, especially where, and I was listening to the session before, there are going to be certain circumstances where maybe everyone is facing a different direction. So if we want to mitigate these pressures, we should talk about them in advance, like we're doing today, in a safe zone, to think about how we might get challenged and how we're going to respond to those dilemmas when they're inevitably presented. And what research demonstrates is that the more we talk about these dilemmas and challenges in the safe zone, when a crisis is not at hand, the more likelihood there is that we will act on our values when there is a dilemma. So why not make difficult issues discussable, surface the unknowns, and talk about these issues with your workforce, your community, as to what are the alternative paths to success when presented with a choice between integrity and success, so no one ever feels that they have to sacrifice integrity to succeed. When I started my career, my values were strong. I sold products that saved lives, bullet-resistant vests and vehicles. But by the time I was targeted in a corruption investigation by the United States Department of Justice and the Crown Prosecution Service in the United Kingdom, my values had changed. All I cared about was making money. Well, now my values are back to where they belong, helping people to confront real-world corruption issues. So if you want to keep values strong and not have people like I did waver in their values, we need to talk about them and to talk about them often. So let's help people to understand that there are always choices and to talk about these wonderful and powerful alternatives to corruption, even if they're not always easy to pursue. But now let's talk about choice, right? This is the tough part. Generally, we know what the right thing to do is. However, sometimes in the face of pressure, we do not choose to do the right thing, like I did. There are real pressures at a personal level, at a professional level, at a societal level. But cheating is always a choice. What I didn't have was an accountability partner, someone to help me with my choices when I was uncertain. I could have used someone who would be checking in with me, speaking with me, calling me if I wasn't calling them, to challenge my decision-making, right? They would be helping me to confront these dilemmas when I could use this help. There came a time where I felt trapped in my own success and my prior bad choices. But just because you make one bad decision doesn't mean you have to follow it with another. But unfortunately for me, I didn't do what Mary Gentile talks about, which is to unpack problems together as a team, as a business team, as a community. Instead, I took ethics and integrity into my own hands, and a dangerous silence developed between me and my organization, between me and my family. I wasn't asking anyone for support, and no one was asking me how I was managing. So let's remember that no news doesn't mean good news. So if we know that challenges exist, once again, I return to the theme of let's talk about them and make sure that everyone knows that it's always okay to share their challenges and obstacles to success. I think we can be confident and competent at what we can do, but we can also be confused from time to time. There's nothing wrong with that. We just need to help everyone anticipate and prepare for these real world moral clashes, which are completely normal. We need to help everyone respond with a strong counter-argument when confronted with corruption and to empower them to do what they believe is the right thing to do. And finally, let's talk about purpose. We all have a purpose in life, a personal code of conduct. As I shared, my purpose was corrupted from saving lives by selling armored vests and vehicles to financial gain. And that cost, me losing my purpose, also had a cost to my family. I was overseas 250 days a year for a decade in my role as an international sales vice president. I thought if I had fancy holidays with my children, that it would make up for me being absent in their lives. I lost touch with my network of loved ones, the people who were counting on me to look after their welfare. Now the opposite is true. It's the relationships in my lives that matter. For example, speaking to you today at the invitation of the Africa Business Ethics Conference community, with thanks again for all the supporters and for bringing me and my voice to share this with you today. So I think we can all be a part of a common purpose. So in summary, let's empower ourselves and our workforce to be able to do what we know is the right thing to do, even if it seems quite difficult, maybe even impossible, especially when everyone else might be facing the opposite direction. So for everyone here today, let's help give voice to people to act on what they know is the right thing to do in such a complex world. Thank you for allowing me and the opportunity to share my journey from old Richard to new Richard in terms of how to do what's right and never to sacrifice integrity to succeed. Together, individually and collectively, by talking about these issues, we can help people to make very principled decisions, an ethical decision in what's a very complex world. Thank you.
Richard, thank you very much for those very inspiring words.
Thank you.
Our next speaker today, I have the pleasure of introducing Oluwadare Kolawole. He's the Deputy Director of the Social Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP. Mr. Kolawole is an anti-corruption advocate and a human rights lawyer. He has a passion for social action and litigation, and he has been actively involved in pro bono litigation for the Lagos Public Interest Law Partnership, amongst others. He is a member of the IBA, NBA Human Rights Committee, Lagos Branch and Police Station Visitation Volunteer Initiative, and he is the Deputy Director at SERAP, where he oversees the advocacy and litigation programs. On a personal note, he loves art and he writes poetry. Mr. Kolawole, why don't you start us off in terms of talking a little bit about your own journey and perhaps, how NGOs like SERAP really start to get involved in terms of changing behavior, both in the public sector, the private sector, and also on a personal level.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for, I'd like to thank the organizers of this.
Mr. Kolawole, can you check your mic? We're having a hard time hearing you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
And not so good. We need a little more volume.
Okay, am I audible now? Is it the
Yes, now we can hear you. Thank you.
So I'm happy it's not on it. Okay, so I'd like to say thank you to the organizers of this event and for everyone who's spoken before me. It's very insightful and I find it very interesting. Am I audible now? I could hear someone saying I'm not audible.
Mr. Kolawole, your mic is also a little bit low.
Maybe you should remove the earphones and just speak directly into your system.
That's possibly going to make it worse. I've had that at other meetings and the airpiece just am I audible now?
Yes, just raise your volume, sir. Raise your volume.
Okay. So, like I said, I thank the organizers of this event and those who have spoken before me. And so, looking at the discourse and to answer directly the question that Elias has asked about, I see it as the incentive of SERAP and what we've been doing over the years and that keeps us going. Looking at Nigeria the way it started off and where we are now, we can see that vital missing link of socioeconomic rights of the people. Yes, so much is said about the various technical details of GDP, per capita income, and co. But the things that really matter to the individual who may not be literate is how that affects what he eats and how he feeds and what he does. And that is why we put in we do our work, basically to make sure that that legal framework of human rights in Nigeria recognizes, enforces, and brings to the fore that socioeconomic rights of Nigerians. To live to the highest end of the value, and taking a cue from what Father Yancy had said, to be happy. That is the essence of being. And so what we've seen over the years as part of what we do as advocacy, I always say what we're doing in SERAP is two-pronged. And one is a form of advocacy to the government, which some people call holding government to account. And the other side is a form of public enlightenment to citizens, more or less telling them their rights, making them know where they stand. And now they can contribute, living a life of integrity, values for themselves, and also holding the government to account. And so that is what we've been doing over the years. And we've seen that this issue of ethics, or what we call values or integrity, is at the heart of even the governance that provides socioeconomic rights to Nigerians. And it's also at the heart of how Nigerians react to that process of taking benefits of what is provided by the government, even in everyone's individual sphere. And so, but in my own personal experience, I would say ethics is more of responsibility, and hence it's personal. And so we can see the various agents of ethics as they interplay, the family, society, and even the state. And it is important to notice in Nigeria that the Nigerian state, for all the failings, the perceived or alleged failings of the 1999 Constitution, have built-in structures, legal framework that purport, at least on the face of it, to advance the cause of ethics. And that is clearly seen in Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which ironically, I find it very funny, has been held by the highest court in Nigeria not to be justiciable, in that they do not have the force of law. So it's more or less giving someone something with the right and collecting it back with the left. And so we've seen the various interplay of these agents of ethics and how they play. And I would say, for emphasis for what we do at SERAP, that the state plays a critical role. Yes, family plays its own role, society plays its own role, but the state as one of the agents of ethics, integrity, and what we see as values, what collectively can be termed social norms, they play that critical role in providing a legal framework, so to speak, the incentive and the disincentive, and by way of punitive measures to punish and to incentivize good behavior, which forms the cumulative of societal values. And that is what we've seen is not really present in Nigeria. To do a bit about my own personal experience, when I started legal practice, the first thing that I saw being green then was the level of wrong that clients approach an average legal practitioner to do. And it's interesting to see that these clients believe that lawyers are generally not honest, yet they come to that lawyer with appeals and even fees to do that which is wrong. And I've always found that quite as an amateur sociologist, how people will hold that belief and still induce a lawyer to do what is not right. And so, given that context, I've asked myself over and over again, the legal practice in Nigeria, for instance, is it really a profession, as it were, we call it a noble profession, or a business, and that should be regulated? And that is my own constituency, so I'm very passionate about it. That speaks to how it should be regulated as a reflection, just a tiny part of society which plays a vital role in the judicial process. So, as a way of pointing out ways, I would say that choice remains a very vital way of driving ethics, either as an individual or in the public service. We all know public servants or public officers are drawn from society. They are not from heaven. They are from within us. And that is why that understanding that the personal choices we make, either in the private sphere or in the public space, has consequences. First and foremost for us, and then not generally for society. That knowledge, I believe, if it is driven adequately by the various agents of ethics, the state, the family, and the society, we begin to produce that consciousness that after all, our destiny, as I said, in Africa is in our hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oludare. I'm not used to having my panelists not taking their full allotted time, so we definitely appreciate your conciseness and brevity. And thank you very much for those comments. I would like to now introduce everyone to Fatma Mawi. She is the CEO of Milestone Resources from Nairobi, Kenya. She is also the vice chair of the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Milestone Resources, and Fatma specifically, is a consulting management professional with extensive experience in consulting specifically with companies. As a growth strategist who works with individuals for their own personal development, with organizations for their effectiveness and growth. But she's also, as a leader of a business chamber, is working very hard to sustain over time the business associations. So Fatma, given your specific experiences, can you perhaps speak to us a little bit about what businesses and associations can do to instill a culture of integrity in their own organizations? What can we do as leaders?
Thank you, Lars. As you heard, my name is Fatma. And to be honest, it's an honor to be here. I'm a consultant and a trainer in ethics and a franchisee of SIPE. In 2018, I was inspired to hold a conference on business ethics where issues of corruption could be discussed in an open environment with a view to getting solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, corruption is our big elephant in the room, and it will not be gotten off so easily. Now, two incidences inspired me to have this conference. Number one, as a consultant and in the process of my business, I approached a bank and I wanted business from them, and everything went smoothly. I actually got the business until we got time to signing off, and I was giving in my quotations. When I got there, that is when the young man looked at it and said, "Madam, your figures are pretty low. Could you please," well, there was no please, "could you increase your cost so that you can factor my 40%? I was so shocked. And because I was so shocked, the guy laughed and then asked me, "Are you sure you are Kenyan?" The other one, because of compliance, we train organizations in Kenya how they can have ethical companies. Whenever we went to companies, people would say, no, we don't need the training. We are ethical. We don't need this. So you find that private sector, we talk a lot about ethics, yet when we are called upon to stand, we don't want to do that. And I felt, if nobody wants to talk about ethics, why don't we have it? And that is when I started and I said, we are going to have a conference on business ethics. I am happy to say that SIPE Kenya helped me, in fact, Bwana Ben Kiragu. And I'd also like to pay tribute to Lars from Washington and Lola, because they helped us to bring, to deliver ABEC. This small group of people, we managed to get like-minded people, for example, the governor of Central Bank, KEPSA Foundation. I can see Patrick Obath, so he was there with us, Adrian, and the Standard Media Group, of course, with the Blue Company. We managed to get like-minded people. It was not easy, but we managed to get on board and we managed to have this conference. Now, what were the key learnings from ABEC 2019? It's the role of media. It is about public education, and I loved what Aisha said. It is also about supportive legislative landscape, independent judiciary, and then, and this is what the Reverend spoke about, building a culture of ethics and integrity. Having collective action through a multi-sectoral approach, self-regulation, ladies and gentlemen, and a culture of integrity is crucial. Why am I saying this? Because corruption is actually, it is you and me. Corruption is not alone. Corruption is constituted socially and in a relationship. But having said that, we can actually arrest this. So how do we do this? We've heard so many things about the evils of corruption. What we need to do is bring it down to the lowest level possible. And that lowest level possible is you and me. For a simple reason that ethical companies or families, they are built from the ground up, not top to bottom. So the challenge of ethics is not just about our leaders, it is also about us, the governed, the citizenry, simply because we contribute to corruption. We contribute either by being active, corrupting or accepting, but also by our silence. So if you're not part of the solution, you actually become part of the problem. We all have the capacity to reduce corruption. Now, how do we manage to do that? We do that by you being aware. We've been told about choices, being aware of what is important to you. Is it profits or is it about having a legacy? You need to align your priorities. For example, for me, it's a small company. I was willing to lose because I could not imagine giving away 40% or even 5% for that matter, because it means that I was not good enough to do the job. I was getting the job because I gave a kickback. It goes back. Your actions speak louder than your words. We've had a lot for the last 3 days, but how many of us would be willing to actually go on that road and say, it's okay, I do not mind losing. I will queue, I will pay taxes, I will pay the necessary licenses. Because when you don't do that, facilitation payments become a must. So you and I become part of the problem and not the solution. I want us to take, remember the 10 commandments? Commandment number 8, it tells us, thou shalt not steal. Yet we steal every single day. What are we stealing? Money, time, but above all, we steal opportunities from the next generation. So being ethical is not a one-off event. It is something that you do every single day. You have choices, we have heard. Being aware of what you do is the first step, and then taking those choices is what makes the difference. It is these daily small things when no one is watching, your honesty, your integrity, as well as your commitment to doing the right thing. It doesn't really matter how big, how small. The fight against corruption is not about the title. It is not about the position that you hold. It's about you, the individual. What is it that you want to get done? I want to quote Delia Ferreira, chair of Transparency International, who said, people's indifference is the best breeding ground for corruption to grow. So if everyone helps to hold up the sky, then one person does not become tired. This is from the African book of Proverbs. So for me, in summary, it is about you. Will you bribe a policeman? Will you pay the teacher to pass your child so that because your child has not done their reading? Now, these may sound trivial to you. They may sound small, but that is where it starts. That is what guides you. You will say, I need more profits. Less profits is okay. You will still survive. So in summary, allow me to quote Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who said that, do your little bit of good where you are, because it is but it depends on what we want to do. Those when no one else is good, when we put them together, it depends on you for giving me this opportunity to address you, and thank you for listening to me. It's an honor to be here at ABEC, Nigeria, ABEC 2020. Thank you, Lars, and back to you. Asante.
Asante sana, Fatma. Thank you very much for some very inspiring remarks and some practical choices that we can make every day. As the final panelist today, I'd like to introduce Mr. Mohammed Ashiru Baba. He is the Director of Education at the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission, ICPC. Mr. Baba, how does after hearing from individuals, businesses, and as well from you are our representative from government, and so how does the ICPC empower personal integrity and ethics in the crusade against corruption? What specifically do you do about making sure that people make the right choices?
Thank you, Mr. Lars. We in ICPC, we are pained by the fact that our values of honesty and integrity as a Nigerian nation have been lost on us. And so we are making an effort to see that we resuscitate and rejuvenate these values so that the cases of corruption are greatly minimized. I represent, like you said, the chairman of ICPC, Professor Bolaji Owasonye, SAN, and he has a message which I pass on to the Secretariat, and I've been assured that copies will be circulated through email. But to answer your question, I do not have to refer to the message. I'm going to speak direct on with some personal experiences like you suggested. First of all, if you recall, or as a Nigerian, in the 60s and the 70s, the market woman selling tomato on the roadside could afford to display her tomato on the table and go inside the house and cook for her husband and come back and meet money on the table. Somebody would have bought the tomato and left the money there. Nobody would touch it. That was in the 60s and the 70s, coming towards middle 80s. But as soon as we entered into the 90s, if the woman made the mistake of displaying her wares on the table and turn around to gist with her fellow woman trader, before she turns around, the entire table, not only money, will disappear. That is the extent to which our values of honesty and integrity in this country are lost on us, and we are greatly pained by that. Coming to the question of what ICPC is doing, we decided to approach the resuscitation of these values bottom up and top bottom. First of all, we decided to catch the youths young at their formative stage. We formed anti-corruption clubs in secondary schools. We revised the national curriculum, educational curriculum, by infusing anti-corruption values of honesty, integrity, nationalism, patriotism, love for one another, etc., into examinable subjects for teaching at basic, talking about primary school and post-basic, as well as tertiary institutions. And at the moment, ICPC is busy training teachers on how to identify those core values infused into examinable subjects and to teach them direct to the students so that they will now grow up with these values infused or with these values impinned in their character, attitude. That is what I call catch them young. We've also initiated the National Ethics and Integrity Policy, which cuts across both the private and public and the private sector, also with a view to restoring the national ethics and values, not only in workplaces, but also in private dealings. And we decide that the implementation will be cascaded down up to the grassroots level. Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari launched the National Ethics and Integrity Policy on 28th of September, after it was adopted by the Federal Executive Council on the 19th of August. We also have a forum for business communities. Business communities and professional bodies, whereby we encourage them to practice their professional activities based on their strictly in compliance with their ethical code of ethical practice. And we try to key in their code of professional ethics into the anti-corruption law, so that violation of the professional code of ethics will automatically mean violating the ICPC law. Talk about collecting bribery. When you collect bribery or you collect gratification or you give, you are in a direct violation of the ICPC law. And if you engage in quackery, also cutting corners, which explains the collapse of buildings here and there. For instance, in the construction industry, you also violate the professional code of ethics of the building professional organization, as well as the ICPC law. So we in enforcing the ethics and integrity policy, such persons will be culpable and will be punishable under the law. These, in essence, are some of the activities that we engage in trying to restore ethics and values in not only the private sector and as well as the public sector. Now, we also establish anti-corruption monitoring units in ministries, departments, and agencies. All ministries, departments, and agencies at the federal level have our own monitoring units, whereby we monitor how government agencies do carry out their activities in strict compliance with the public service rules and other ethics regulation and financial regulations. And it might interest you to know that all these measures and policies that ICPC has put in place are really yielding dividend, because at the moment we've saved the government about 146 billion money from MDAs that were found to have been credited into private accounts, and we directed that the money should be returned to government. And so many assets we've recovered through this process. We've also monitored the way legislators are carrying out their activities regarding the constituency projects, not only the legislators, but also members of the executives in carrying out various projects, especially at the grassroots level. Many legislators and many members of the executive will collect money in the names of constituency projects and will not execute the projects. So we decided to follow up the money and ensure that the projects are completed and put to use for public use. And where the monies are outrightly stolen, we recover the money and put them back into government coffers. Thank you very much for this opportunity to express ourselves and explain what we've been doing in order to restore and rejuvenate ethical values in Nigeria. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Baba, and all of the good work that you do over there at the ICPC. So thank you very much, and you and your colleagues. We're moving now to the question and answer section. I would welcome everybody to please use the Q&A or the chat function in terms of asking a couple of questions. I'm going to move us to a lightning round. And so I'm going to ask all of the panelists to essentially respond to one question, but you only have a minute before we go to the rest of the Q&As. And the minute and the question is also something I picked up in some of the comments, but it's really, when we talk, we've talked a lot about ethics and integrity over the past hour, but how do we reward ethical behavior? What are the incentives we can do as companies, as individuals, or as government to essentially encourage the right type of behavior? Now, remember, you only have a minute, so I'm going to start us off with the Reverend Father to answer this question. Reverend Father, are you still with us?
Yes. I will spend my minute by showing, unfortunately it's not showing well, this book. I decided to start showcasing people who are struggling to live lives of integrity. This booklet is titled Nigeria, Models of Integrity. Its publication was supported by the MacArthur Foundation to show that in the midst of the rot in the land, there are people who are still living lives of integrity. So we need to tell their stories and show them as success stories of integrity and character, and that they are happy doing that. So this is the contribution that my organization, Luke Sterra Leadership Foundation, wants to make to promote and reward or recognize people who have been struggling to live the life of integrity. That is one way to go, to showcase people who are making good efforts in the midst of the rot in the land. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Father. Richard?
It's a tough one for a minute, but I'll give it a go. So when we think about incentivizing ethical behavior, I would encourage everyone to take a look at a bottle of prescription medication and turn it on its side. And you're going to see the warning and the side effects of those medications. Well, when we think of goals, objectives, incentives, and rewards, they all have side effects. And they have ethical and integrity side effects. So going back to Mary Gentile's book, Giving Voice to Values, are we thinking about what are those side effects of our goals, of our objectives, of our rewards? And do even the side effects of those goals align with our goals of promoting ethics, integrity, and long-term sustainable, responsible business growth? So let's think about what the side effects of incentives are and to ask ourselves, are we promoting a dangerous reward system, and to make sure that we're not.
Fantastic, Richard. Oludare?
Okay, so I would say that the best way to reward as a way of incentive for good behavior, again, rests on the government. Creating a system that works, public services, essential services like health, education, access to social justice is the best level playing ground that the government can provide. That itself is enough. And that assures the poor that if he or she works hard, he will be rich and will be taken care of. That is enough. Creating any kind of system creates, like Richard had mentioned, something that may not be sustainable. And so we must be careful not to destroy something and build up a dragon that nobody can control.
Thank you, Oludare. Fatma?
For me, it's number one, it's about walking the talk as a person. You need to do what you say you're going to do. And then, of course, it's about you associating with like-minded people. You see, because we have a saying, if you surround yourself with fishmongers, you will also smell fishy. So you need to have the right kind of people. And then, of course, there are always recommendations that go to the government, to the municipality. Those are the people that need to be rewarded, that need to be recommended. On the side of the government, I believe it's about if organizations are paying their taxes well, they are doing everything right. Those are the people that need to be recognized by the government. But how will the government know? The government or the proper institutions will have been given the names of the people that actually do the right thing. And in Kenya, we know who those people are. Challenges come, it is always the wrong people that actually seem to be picked. Over to you, Lars.
Thank you, Fatma. Mohammed?
Thank you, Mr. Lars. Section 6B to D of the enabling law, ICPC enabling law, provides that we should build the institutional capacity. It's part of our responsibility to ensure that the system works through advisory to government agencies, as well as by conducting system study and then suggesting review of systemic operations that encourage corruption, and also corruption risk assessment. We conduct corruption risk assessment. We have trained our officers, internationally acclaimed corruption risk assessors. So we go from one ministry, department or the other to assess their activities with a view to finding out which activities they do or they carry out officially or unofficially that encourage corruption, and we suggest a review. That's one way of building the institutions so that things will work in line with what Kolawole said, actually. Now, talking about reward, as Mr. Lass said, ICPC has a system of rewarding honest people. In 2018 2019 precisely, there was this woman, Spin Ugu, a cleaner here in Murtala Mohammed International Airport. The cleaner working with Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria on a salary of just below 30,000 naira a month. Yet she found monies in dollars. When converted to naira, to translate into millions of naira in foreign currency in dollars, the cleaner returned the money not once, not twice. Many people assumed that she was mentally insane, but the woman kept doing it, even though she had nothing virtually. She returned the money. There was also the customs officer whom we discovered had rejected bribery given to him in order to import tramadol, cartons or containers of tramadol into Nigeria. So many people like that. We invited them to the villa and the president recognized them. As for Josephine Ugu, the cleaner, we built a house for her here in Lagos and we furnished the house for her because she told us that her main problem is where to stay. So we gave her a house and we furnished the house for her. Her name is Josephine Ugu here in Lagos. So the custom officer, we gave him money also. So many people like that appreciated. We also have a regime of naming and shaming. We find you to be recalcitrant in corrupt practices. We name you and shame you as an individual or organization. We have all these forums. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. We've actually received quite a few questions, and so unfortunately, I'll warn everybody, we're not going to have enough time to answer all of them, and I have to be very selective. So the first question is the theme that we've all been talking about here today, and it's really talking about, as the Reverend Father first started talking about, is really about role models. And so the question is, how can society supply and facilitate the rise of these good individuals, these role models, to positions of power so that they can play a decisive role in getting rid of corruption? I would also invite you at this point to potentially give, and I'll ask, this is a good question for everyone, I'll ask that you not only respond to that, but perhaps give us your final closing comments. Again, I'm going to have to limit you to approximately about a minute. I apologize. Reverend Father, you started us off. We'll come back to you.
Thank you. Very quickly, it's we need to begin to celebrate people of character. We need to help religious houses, schools, community places. We all need to begin to celebrate and project. I said earlier that society produces the kind of values that it projects. We get more of them. So if we project wealth and wealthy people, we will get more of them. It doesn't matter how they make the wealth. So right now we need to begin to look for people of character to show to our young people that these are the people we revere. These are the people that we respect. We need to, in our society where they have chieftaincy titles, we need to give more chieftaincy titles to people who have character and who are contributing to society than just people who are wealthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Father. I'm actually going to mix it up in terms of the order, and I will turn now to Kolawole.
So it goes back to a good system and a process. What if the people are willing to vote or elect someone that has integrity, and the system created by the government will not allow it? It still creates a problem. And that is why I would insist that only the government has that statutory body by virtue of the social contract to create systems. Every other system, religion, traditional, they are moral obligations. They are not statutory. The government has that responsibility. So if citizens want to elect people of integrity, there must be a system of elections, credible elections backed up by a legal framework that allows it. If the system created by the government does not allow it, the people of integrity will not be able to get there, even if the majority of people want to vote them to get there.
Thank you, Oludare. We're going to turn to Mohammed.
Thank you, Lars. It's an honest fact. It's very painful. It's a painful fact that as of today in Nigeria, it's very difficult to have a crop of role models that the society can rely on when it comes to matter of integrity. I think those years have gone by. It's very painful. But through our name and rewarding kind of procedure, that mechanism, that is the one I mentioned earlier, we try to, as much as possible, build a kind of a college of role models. And then we now carry them along to talk to the young ones and see why integrity pays. So it is now that we are making effort to build a college of integrity people, people of integrity. At times when you assume that a person has integrity, today, tomorrow he becomes something else. Unlike in the past years, in Nigeria today is a very shameful fact, actually. But we are trying to build our collegiate of integrity people who will be now talking to the young ones and groom them so that the young ones also grow up as people of integrity. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's very difficult. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. Richard, we'll turn to you.
Thank you, Lars. I would just pivot on what Mohammed and the Reverend Father had to say, which is elevate and celebrate people who have demonstrated through their own power of example that we can act on our values and with integrity. Now, in different parts of the world, those people might come from different places. They might come from government, they might come from the private sector, the public sector, they may come from civil society or houses of worship, right? And I think in every country that combination will be a little different. They might be journalists. So wherever they are, those leaders really need to be elevated, celebrated, and to shine a big light of example on the work that they're doing, however they are doing it.
Fabulous. And Fatma, you have the final word.
Well, thank you. For me, to be honest with you, I think we need to remove focus away from material things. We are where we are because we put a lot of focus in power and a lot of focus on money. So when the young children grow up, everybody wants that car, that house, that money. So we need to celebrate. Let us celebrate contribution to society, contribution to humanity. As Richard says, you need to elevate and celebrate. Have integrity ambassadors. For example, every year in Kenya, the president elevates or gives recognition to some people. And this is where we need to recognize people that have contributed to society, apart from just money. Focus needs to go away from the material things, and then we can bring a bigger scope into the conversation of how humanity can grow. Thank you, Lars.
Thank you so much. I would like to really, please join me everyone in thanking our panelists for a fantastic session. I have just being very cognizant of the time. We didn't have enough time on this fascinating topic and with all of these fascinating speakers. So again, truly on behalf of all of the organizers, the sponsors of ABEC, I would like to thank you for all your contributions and really some inspiring words of wisdom from everyone. Thank you very much. Up here, you do have the contact information for all of us. If any of the panelists would like, panelists or participants would like to reach out to any of the individual speakers here today, you will find their emails available to you on the screen in front of you. And with that, I am going to give up my moderator responsibilities and hand this back to the MC. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lars.
Thank you
very much, Mr. Lars, for that beautiful, beautiful session. We really, really did enjoy it. I don't know if you were able to hear the round of applause from this live session here in Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It was indeed a beautiful session, and we say thank you to Mr. Lars, Regional Director for Africa SIPE, and also we want to say special thank you to Mr. Mohammed Ashiru Baba, who interestingly is representing the chairman of the ICPC in person of Professor Bolaji Owosanoye San. So, sir, please, as you go back, extend our love and our appreciation to the chairman and the entire ICPC family. Thank you for coming, sir. And also the other wonderful panelists that joined in this session, from Reverend Father Ehosani and Mr. Oluwadare Kolawole, the Deputy Director of Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP. And of course, the wonderful and only woman in the park, Fatma El Mawi, CEO, Milestones Resources, Nairobi, Kenya. Extend our loves to our brothers and sisters back home in Kenya. And also Mr. Richard Bystrong, who was very passionate and energetic in his delivery on how on his personal journey towards combating the issue of corruption. And today he's here with us to tell us his beautiful story. We say thank you. And of course, finally, Chief Chris Okunowo, President and Chairman of Council Institute of Directors. We say thank you to all of you that was part of this wonderful session. And for those who sent in questions that we could not take because of the time, as I did mention earlier, we will be sending feedbacks on all your questions even after this event is over. It's a continuous engagement. Corruption is a subject matter that we cannot trash even in 1 month of a conference. So it's an ongoing process that, and we'll definitely and gradually get there if all hands are on deck. So we'll do well to respond to your questions long after this event is over. Now, moving along, we're now at the part of the program that involves us discussing about the 3-minute pitch that we've been mentioning since day one, and of course the ABEC Ambassador Challenge too that we had. And to give us more light on this, I shall be inviting 2 wonderful women who will be shedding more light as regards to the ABEC Challenge and the 3-minute pitch before we move to some videos that we shall be showing the general audience. First on my list, I'll be inviting Lola Adekanye, who's the lead business integrity and anti-corruption programs at SIPE for Sub-Saharan Africa. Is Lola here with us? Okay, yes, Lola is here with us online. So Lola, you have the floor, please. Welcome on board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ozumba, and I hope everyone can hear me. Good afternoon. Yes, great, thank you. Good afternoon to everyone here in Nigeria. Good morning to my colleagues in DC, and good evening to my colleagues in the other parts of on the African continent. Thank you very much to everyone and to our participants for joining this conversation. from wherever you are in the world. It's regarding an issue that affects our lives and livelihoods, regardless of creed, region, or country. And I'm glad that you're all able to join us today. I want to quickly say thank you to our colleagues on the SIPE team, the LCCI, ABEC, and the Accountability Labs teams for all the effort and their excellent ideas in preparing the two challenges that we're going to be talking about today. The first one is the ABEC, the Africa Business Ethics Conference Ambassador Award. And that's the first one. And the second one is the 3-minute pitch on an anti-corruption idea for, an anti-corruption solutions idea. That's the second award. Specifically on the 3-minute speech, we had about 84 entries, and we were looking to have 5 finalists, but we might have to go with a little bit more than 5 because we had such excellent entries. And thank you very much to the participants there. On the ABEC Ambassador Award, we had about 14 entries. We couldn't get more nominations than just one because we required the company or organization to send in some documents to demonstrate their capacity to strengthen or to make sure that they have strong corporate ethics and integrity compliance programs in place. Only one company of the 14 sent in their documents. However, given the time frame between when we received the documents and now, we haven't had time to screen that. So we look forward to following up with that company after the conference today. And the results of the ABEC Ambassador Award will be published on the ABEC website. However, I'd like to recognize that one company for submitting those documents as requested. And that company is the Kaiser Group, or Construction Kaiser Limited. Thank you very much to the Kaiser team for sending in your documentation, and we'll very much be very eager to follow up with you after the ABEC conference. Thank you. Now, moving on to the 3-minute speech challenge. It's my honor to be announcing the finalists and the rewards for the 3-minute pitch challenge alongside my friend and colleague, Rachel Muthoga, based in Nairobi. Rachel chairs the ABEC committee, and she was an active part of planning the Maiden ABEC conference in 2019, which you heard a little bit about when Fatma Elmawi on the previous panel talked about it. At the time, Rachel was the deputy director of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, KEPSA, which is the apex business membership body in Kenya. And she led the KEPSA team in organizing the ABEC alongside our SIPE Kenya team and our LCCI team here in Nigeria and the SIPE team in DC and as well. So I'd like to invite Rachel to say a few words about the 3 minutes challenge idea, the ethos, the concept and the thinking behind it before we go ahead without wasting more time to announce the finalists and give you all a chance to watch some of the videos that we've had the pleasure of watching from the pitches that the finalists made. So Rachel, if you're here, please
Thank you so much, Lola. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Greetings and good afternoon, everyone, from the coast of Kenya. I'm currently in Kilifi along the coast of Kenya, and it's my great pleasure to join you this afternoon as we deliberate on these issues that affect our continent, all the way from the Cape to Cairo, and that we have come together today to deliberate in Nigeria and to find solutions for the challenges that we face across the continent. Having listened to the presentations from the beginning of this conference, it's really been interesting to hear about some of the challenges that have been brought out, but also some of the solutions that we have brought and are using in challenging the problem of corruption in our countries. Happily for us, this session and the Ideas Challenge, it's centered around innovative thinking, looking forward and saying, despite the challenges that we face, despite the problems that we have seen before, what can we do differently? How can we use innovation as a way to re-energize the fight against corruption and also to give to ourselves new tools that would enable us to be even more effective than we have been in the past? So as we go forward, we're looking at being able to receive from both the Ideas Challenge and also the Ambassadors Challenge some of the new thinking that hopefully would map and be directing us as we go forward and as we look at what we would do differently, both as private sector, as government, as religious leaders, and every other facet of society. So challenges such as the one that has been set before us and the entries that we have seen are really useful in guiding us, and we really look forward to seeing how we can create a future that is vastly different from the past, and that can really be able to give the generations that come after us a new force and a new energy to do things differently. So as we look at the videos, as we watch the videos, and as we look at the entries that have come into this competition, I challenge us as those who are participating in this conference. I challenge us to be able to take up some of these ideas and to really give them life so that they can go from innovation actually to coming to life and to fruition on the ground. So as we watch this, I would really hope that we can be inspired to change from a business as usual approach to doing things differently, to a more proactive position that would give us power over the dragon of corruption. So over to you, Lola. We look forward to the engagement.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Okay, so now to the finalists. Before I read the finalists out and tell you who we selected and how we selected, I'll just like to quickly say, for the benefit and to encourage those of us in the anti-corruption community, and also to optimists that we can reform our country, we can reform and export these good ideas across Africa and globally to strengthen governance and reduce corruption. I'd like to say to you that from just watching and reading the pitches, two things are encouraging. One is a lot of young people, a lot of people who sent in their pitches really understand the complexities of fixing the problem that we're talking about today, corruption. It's a very complex challenge to solve. And the second thing is there's no apathy, as we'll think. Many of them are committed to trying to figure out innovative solutions to the challenge. And by the challenge such as this, we're able to harvest those good ideas and find ways to support them. So I'm very encouraged, and I hope you are too. We were going to have 5 finalists. However, having reviewed the 84 entries that we got, and I must say Accountability Lab Nigeria and their global team did a lot of work on that. So we made sure that we had an independent sort of arbiter looking at these things. We got to about 3 ties in 4th position, which means that we have to go with 6 finalists rather, and that has been accepted. So I will go ahead and quickly call the names of the finalists, starting from the 6th. The 6th, and please feel free to give a round of applause if you can on Zoom. I'm not sure you can, but if you're in the hall, please feel free to give a round of applause to these excellent winners. So the 6th finalist is Oladipo Olufemi Gabriel. That's the 6th finalist. And the 5th finalist is Adedayo Bolakun. And the 4th finalist is Temitope Adetoye Benjamin. In the interest of time, we're not going to show their pitches, but we'll try to make sure we have enough time to show the other 3 pitches, or at least one of them if the MC tells me we have time. The 4th to 6th finalists, I would like to say congratulations to you on behalf of the SIPE LCCI team, the ABEC team, and the AL team. You will all receive, you will each receive a token reward of 200,000 Naira each, but that's not all. We definitely want to encourage your ideas. So we'll be inviting you to join the top 3 finalists who I'm about to read out their names. Join them in submitting your fully developed ideas, and attend the bootcamp to help refine your ideas and make them into implementable proposals. So thank you very much for sending in your ideas. Now to the top 3 finalists. In 3rd place, we have Latif Abiodun Oseni. In 2nd place, yes, I think I heard a round of applause. It's not a miss. Please go ahead. In 2nd place, we have Chiamaka Ibe. And in 1st place, we have Chukwuemeka Ayim Osigwe. Congratulations to the top 3 finalists. You will each also receive this time 400,000 Naira as the token reward. And we would also certainly be working with you to refine your ideas, as I mentioned earlier. Because of time, I will defer to Mr. Ozumba, the MC, to determine how many of these videos we can play. But right now, I'd like to invite all of us to listen to the first place candidate's pitch. If we can go ahead and play that, and if we have more time, certainly cue in the second place candidate. Over to you at the hall. Please go ahead and play the first video.
Thank you very much, Lola Adekanya, for that wonderful presentation, and also Rachel Mutonga, all the way from Kenya. We say thank you to that. So what we've done in-house here is we can only play 3 videos, and in the order of sequence, we're going to do it in the form of a countdown, 3, 2, 1. So we'll start with the third on the list, third place winner. So let's get the video from the third place winner, please.
Nigeria's albatross is corruption. There are many reasons why corruption is prevalent in Nigeria today. Can Nigeria tackle corruption in an innovative way that ensures stability and the interest of the common good? This question remains to be answered. The goal of this proposal is to strengthen the integrity of our public officials, and in return get better decision making by lawmakers. What is integrity? Integrity allows you to determine good from bad. It also speaks to exemplary behavior while performing your duties. In order to define corruption, we must understand why it's prevalent. My position is that corruption is prevalent in Africa because the laws that govern us were imposed, imported, photocopied, without taking into account our traditional norms and values which we hold dear to ourselves, and which we've used to govern ourselves over 500 years. My solution, an idea to tackling corruption in Nigeria in a way that remains sustainable and will grind at the heart of the public institution that governs us, is an artificial intelligence tool known as the Personal Integrity Scorecard. Every public official will hold this scorecard, and it will be publicly and fairly made available to everyone to determine if this is an effective leader or not. Part of the inputs into this PIS, Personal Integrity Scorecard, will be number of political parties joined. It will be your wealth as a measure of how many years you've been in service. It would also speak to how much access the media has to asking the tough and relevant questions to officials. The results expected from this would be a PIS score that is the lifetime achievement, a lifetime score, and this will lead to efficient decision making and allocation of scarce resources in an efficient way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that was the video from the third place winner. So right about now, let's watch the video from the second place winner. Who interestingly
Good morning. My name is Chiamaka Ibe, an MBA student at the Lagos Business School, and this is my pitch for tackling corruption in the public sector in Nigeria. Now, by the Global Corruption Perception Index, Nigeria ranks 146 out of 180 countries. This means that Nigeria is very close to the bottom of the list of the most corrupt countries in the world. Now, corruption requires a human element. Humans demand and collect bribes. Humans request for kickbacks. Humans inflate budgets and misappropriate funds for their own purposes, their own private gain. Now, in the elimination of this human interface in the course of transactions, government transactions, would serve to bring corruption to the barest minimum. Now, how can we remove the human interface in the course of government processes? Essentially, automation, digitization, and process automation. Now, my proposal is a website for all government ministries, departments, and agencies, which I call youragency.gov. Now, with this website, all MDAs will be hosted on this particular website. All their transactions, all processes, procurement of licenses, registration of companies will all be done on one platform. Now, on this platform, there will be cloud technology and blockchain technology, which will enable the efficient storage of data and documentation of the processes of each of these MDAs. And also, in addition to combating corruption, that is removing this human element, there will be increased efficiency of these processes, essentially, with real-time collaboration amongst these MDAs. The FIRS can work with the CAC directly, the NIPC, and all the over 23 MDAs under its one-stop investment center would operate through one website. So people come in, you make payments online. There's the remitter that hosts the Treasury single account payment platform, essentially. Payments will be done online, transactions will be done online, and then receipts, licenses, and all of that will be sent via email. So this essentially takes up that human element and will definitely serve to cure this scourge of corruption. Technology is the answer. Let's fight it together with youragency.gov. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really beautiful to see that one of the winners is a woman. So that tells you that the issue of corruption and the ideas to fight corruption comes from every quarter, both from the male folks and beautifully from the female folks. So we say thank you and congratulations to the second winner. Now let's move over to the video for the top winner, the first on the list. Please watch.
Hello, my name is Chukwu Mekania Mushibu, and this is my submission for the African Business Ethics Conference. Behavioral economics has shown us that little changes in human behavior affect the way we view life. For example, someone who steals office stationery simply rationalizes it as taking something from the office rather than what it is, stealing from the office. In an attempt to create a paradigm shift, I am proposing an innovative game that will help bring to the level of people's consciousness their ethical choices they make when faced with ethical decisions. The game will have 3 levels, and each level will focus on a particular theme. So for example, level 1 will talk about a petty crime. Number 2, we'll consider a big crime, a corporate financial crime, for example. And number 3, level 3, will look at a cost to society, for example, embezzling money for a public project. Let's look at one of the examples, committing a corporate crime, which is a big crime. You are the chief financial officer of a large firm, and you have shipments due for next year that has already been sent out. What do? Will you record the shipments? You will record the revenue with this within the financial year, or you record it in the next financial year? You have the option of doing that. So depending on the option you choose in the game, you'll be seen as either someone with a strong ethical compass or a weak ethical compass. Ideally, the best thing to do in that game, in that situation, is to record the revenue in the next financial year, despite the fact that shipment has already been sent out. And the aim of beyond the conference, I would like this game to be incorporated into schools, primary and secondary schools across the African continent, so that children from an early age will be aware of the ethical decisions they have to make. And by doing so, we are building ethical leaders for our continent and a better society that cares about the well-being of all concerned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause to our three wonderful winners. Yes, beautiful. It's good to see that some young, dynamic individuals are already working hard towards formulating practical ideas that can help us tackle the issue of corruption. It's really a wonderful feeling. And we say special thank you and congratulations to the three wonderful, to the 6 selected winners for this competition. And as you heard from Lola, the organizers of this event will work closely with these winners to actualize their ideas into practical solutions that can help us fight the menace of corruption. So we say thank you once more to the winners. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the point of today's program where we shall be listening to words from our very special guest for this year's APEC 2020, who is no other than Professor Yemi Osinbajo, GCON, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But sadly, but not too sadly, for those of us who know the routine here in Nigeria, today is Wednesday, and as a matter of fact, today is the FEC meeting, the Federal Executive Council meeting. So for that sake, it's an all-important meeting that the VP cannot miss. So for that sake, the VP is unavoidably absent. But to show his commitment, if you've been following the trend here in Nigeria, you know the VP is one person who is very committed to the fight against corruption. So to show his commitment to the fight against corruption and his relationship, his very close relationship with LCCI and the organizers of this year's APEC 2020, he has sent in a capable representative, and the representative that will be speaking on behalf of the VP is no other person than Mrs. Miriam Owais. And I'll quickly read a quick profile of Mrs. Owais before we hand over to her to give us her delivery. So please bear with me. Mrs. Miriam Owais, MFR, is the current special advisor to President Muhammad Buhari on social investment. She is a legal practitioner and human rights activist with over 36 years cognate law practice experience, including the Kano State Ministry of Justice, the Nigerian Law Reform Commission, and the Central Bank of Nigeria. Mrs. Owais studied at Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, was admitted to the Nigerian bar in 1981, and obtained an LLM in 1985. She was awarded a certificate in advanced practice and procedure in 1985 and legal drafting in 1989 from the Nigeria Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. Mrs. Miriam Owais, MFR, served as a principal partner of Wali Owais & Co., an Abuja-based law firm. Before then, she had served on the Council of the National Human Rights Commission, where she also worked as special rapporteur on child rights, the board of the Justice Research Institute, the Kuka Center, as well as the Coalition Against Tobacco, amongst others. Kano State Almajiri Committee, President Goodluck Jonathan's Presidential Advisory Council, the Northern Nigerian Governors Committee on Reconciliation, Security Healing, as well as the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of Child for 5 years. She founded the Issa Wale Empowerment Initiative in December 2009, which targets the condition of women and children in education, healthcare, and empowerment. Miriam Owais has also worked as a consultant to the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, UNICEF, the World Bank, and DFID. She has written and published several articles on economic and social rights, interfaith dialogue, child justice administration, and good governance. She was before her appointment a non-executive director and member of the board of directors of Stanbic IBTC Holdings PLC. She was also a member of the editorial board of This Day newspaper. You see that Madame has so much accolades that time will not even permit me to read them all. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me as I make welcome, ably representing the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Mrs. Miriam Owais. Welcome, Madam.
Good afternoon, distinguished members of the ABEC and the LCCI. It is my singular pleasure to be representing or stepping into the big shoes of my immediate principal, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Unfortunately, as conveyed to you, he's unable to present himself this paper that he has done. I'm just here to present the paper for him because he's still in the Federal Executive Council, and I was asked to be on standby just in case he's able to come out before then. Unfortunately, they're still in. So the keynote address goes as follows. I'm delighted to be invited to this year's African Business Ethics Conference. The conference theme, Tackling Corruption to Reduce Poverty, Unemployment and Insecurity in Africa, and Necessity for Building Resilience, is particularly apt because of the tripartite malaise of poverty, unemployment, and insecurity that pervades many parts of the continent, which several impeccable authorities have traced to the pandemic of corruption. The theme also aligns with the three focus areas of the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, which are ensuring security, rebuilding Nigeria's economy, and strenuously working to combat corruption. I believe also that the theme recognizes that the state as an institution and the business community must work in synergy to kick out corruption and prevent it from undermining the continent's ability to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The new social compact to end poverty in all its forms, economic growth, economic diversification, value addition, productive employment, envisioned by the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, states that sound social, environmental, and economic policies, including counter-cyclical fiscal policies, adequate fiscal space, good governance at all levels, democratic and transparent institutions responsive to the needs of the public are necessary to achieve our goals. This agenda further emphasizes that the rule of law, fighting corruption at all levels and in all its forms, civil society, independent media, and other non-state actors also play important roles in this regard. Transparency, accountability, the rule of law, and accountable institutions are the foundations of a democratic society. For us in Nigeria, these values are reinforced by the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria, when it enjoins the state to abolish all corrupt practices and abuse of power. While the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policy of the 1999 Constitution direct the state to harness the economic potentials of the country, it also confers the right on any person to participate in economic activities and business enterprises. The first strategic development document of the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari is the Nigeria Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, 2017 to 2020. ERGP affirmed that government will improve governance by entrenching transparency and fighting corruption, reinforcing security, reforming the public service, and strengthening coordination with subnational governments. These aspirations align with Nigeria's national interests and global commitments. It is internationally recognized that the fight against corruption is not a one-stakeholder affair. Article 12 of UNCAC makes fighting corruption the joint responsibility of the state and the private sector. Article 12 specifically articulates the role that the private sector can play in law enforcement, development of standards and procedures to ensure integrity, codes of correct conduct, honorable and proper performance of activities of businesses, transparency, prevention of misuse of procedures, prevention of conflict of interest, internal auditing controls to detect acts of corruption, and so many other spheres. Corrupt business practices specifically mentioned by Article 12 include off-the-book accounts, off-the-books or inadequately identified transactions, recording of non-existent expenditure, entry of liabilities with incorrect identification of their objects, the use of false documents, and intentional destruction of bookkeeping documents earlier than foreseen by law. Perhaps the worst culprit is illicit financial flows in all its forms. IFFs largely account for the underdevelopment of the continent and our collective inability to meet our own needs. Businesses in Africa must therefore interrogate their role and apparent abetment in the enrichment of other continents through deleterious illicit flight of the African assets and wealth, thereby denying the continent of money that can solve the problems of insecurity, poverty, and unemployment. The Common African Position on Asset Recovery, sponsored by Nigeria and adopted by the AU Council, Executive Council, adopted by the heads of AU at the 33rd National Assembly on the 9th of February 2020, has assigned important roles to stakeholders, including businesses, to sensitize them to the harm of IFFs and how they can help to assist in prevention and recovery of assets. The current administration in Nigeria has adopted a two-track approach to tackling corruption. The first is vigorous effort to address grant corruption, while the second focuses on an entrenchment of processes and procedures to promote transparency and accountability. To coordinate strategic approach to fighting corruption, President Muhammadu Buhari has established the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, PACAC, in the first year of our administration. Government also developed a national anti-corruption strategy, and Mr. President also signed a presidential order in August 2015 to commit to the implementation and expansion of the Treasury Single Account System to ensure the tracking of government revenue. Government's priority areas in her economic recovery and growth plan includes restoration of economic growth, building a competitive economy, investing in our people, and good governance, which of course includes transparency and anti-corruption. In fulfillment of our commitments under the Open Government Partnership, which focuses on transparency, accountability, and citizen participation, President Buhari has inaugurated the OGP National Steering Committee. OGP Nigeria has developed its first national action plan, which focuses on 4 thematic areas of fiscal transparency, anti-corruption, action plan, and access to information and citizens' engagement, and envisages a partnership between the government and the private sector. To reinforce that partnership, as acting president, I signed Executive Order number 001 of 2017 on the promotion of transparency and efficiency in the business environment. The executive order focuses on the following areas. 1, transparency in NDAs. 2, default approvals where NDAs fail to communicate approval or rejection. 3, one government directive. 4, entry experiences of visitors and travelers. 5, port operations. And 6, the registration of businesses. Apart from the above initiatives, the federal government has also established a presidential initiative on continuous audit, PICA, which is domiciled in the Federal Ministry of Finance. PICA sanitizes the federal payroll and pension systems across NDAs, which had hitherto been entrenched in corruption and bedeviled by the phenomenon of ghost workers and ghost pensioners. As of 2018, PICA has helped the federal government to save over 200 billion naira. Several billions have been saved since then. PICA also oversees government's whistleblowing program launched in 2016, which has witnessed huge recoveries in local and foreign currency. In fulfillment of the federal government's commitments under ERGP to ensure transparency and accountability in the management of public resources and also minimize corruption in MDAs, we have continued to implement the federal government's integrated payroll and personnel information system, IPIS, which has assisted in the blockage of payroll fraud. This administration also adopted the International Public Sector Accounting Standards, IPSAS, and Government Integrated Financial Management Information System, GIFMIS, to encumber the ability of public officials to divert government funds. Other initiatives to curb corruption include the enforcement of the BVN and its integration with other national identity management platforms like the National Identity Number and the introduction of the Open Treasury Portal. The Federal Government Bureau of Public Enterprises has developed an online, real-time, national open contracting platform under which government contracts can be viewed on the portal. Similarly, the Infrastructure Concession and Regulatory Commission launched a public-private partnership contracts disclosure portal in September 2017 for disclosure of contract information from project conception to execution. The federal government's budget can now be monitored by citizens in the iMonitor portal to access budget information. Non-state actors can also monitor ongoing procurement on a Budeshi technology platform. The National Assembly passed the new Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020. The Act has expanded and eased bottlenecks in business registration and incorporation. With this new law, Nigeria has joined the League of Countries with a framework for beneficial ownership register. This is a further step in fulfillment of our obligations under the OGP and a necessary tool to minimize IFFs and assist in asset tracing and recovery. The National Assembly also enacted the Secured Transactions in Movable Assets Act 2017 and the Trading Reporting Act 2017. In our individual countries and as a collective, transparency, accountability, integrity, and ethics must guide not only our government institutions, but also the private sector and citizens. In Nigeria, the 1999 Constitution specifically states that our national ethics shall be discipline, integrity, dignity of labor, social justice, religious tolerance, self-reliance, and patriotism. Mindful that social attitudes can be a gap in the anti-corruption landscape, the federal government's policies, programs, and projects audit committee report and its roadmap for the second term of this administration, this is 2019 to 2023, identified the decline in national values and ethics and the resultant glorification of illicit wealth. To provide a vehicle for citizens' engagement and ethical reorientation, the Federal Executive Council adopted the National Ethics and Integrity Policy in August 2020. The core values of the National Ethics and Integrity Policy are human dignity, voice and participation, patriotism, personal responsibility, integrity, national unity, and professionalism. The core value of integrity is the essence of this conference. For businesses, the National Ethics and Integrity Policy affirms, inter alia, the commitment of the private sector to honesty, mutual accountability, transparency, faithfulness, and commitment. In particular, the private sector affirms as follows. As corporations and business entities entrusted with handling any of Nigeria's common natural and other resources, we understand we are dealing with a resource owned by all, and therefore pledge to provide accurate, comprehensive, timely, and accessible self-disclosures on the management of such resources. I would like to conclude by congratulating the winners that have emerged in the competition and by affirming the federal government's resolve to continue to fight corruption in all its ramifications. However, African businesses must raise their voice against corruption and illicit financial flows. Business cannot thrive in an insecure environment. You are not rich when everyone around you is poor or unemployed. I therefore commend the organizers of this conference for choosing this year's theme, because it offers us an opportunity for discussion and introspection on the role that businesses can play in the fight against corruption. I wish you fruitful deliberations with the assurance that you will come up with insights on our collective pathways to reducing poverty, insecurity, and unemployment in our continent. I thank you all, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Miriam Owais, ably representing our guest of honor at this year's ABEC 2020 in person of Professor Yemi Osinbajo, GCO, and the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And from the readout by Madam Owais, you could tell that the VP, as I did mention earlier, is someone that is very passionate about the fight against corruption. And the government is ready to work with everybody. And you could hear at the end, the VP even thanked the winners of this competition this year, showing that, who knows, the government is even going to be willing to work with them. So that's why earlier when I mentioned that those 6 winners, we could actually see a situation where they can synergize and work even with the federal government with their ideas. So it's really a laudable thing that this year's ABEC 2020 has done for the quest towards championing a practical cause in the fight against corruption. Once more, Madam, we say thank you for honoring us with your presence, and do well to give our greetings and our love to the VP, who is a passionate follower of the LCCI as a body. We say thank you, Madam, once more. Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're already at the home stretch of day 3 of ABEC 2020, and what an event it has been. At this point in time, we would like to invite our chief host, who unfortunately is not present with us, and that's no other person than Madam Mrs. Toki Mabogunje. We all know that the Lagos International Trade Fair is still ongoing. So Madam is very busy there, representing the chambers, meeting with delegates, both international and local delegates, and of course, other government functionaries from both the federal and state level. So she has ably sent a representative, a capable representative, I must say, who is no other person than Mr. Gbenga Ismail. Mr. Gbenga Ismail is a real estate practitioner with a tremendous wealth of knowledge and diverse experience in real estate, in the real estate industry. He's also a member of the executive committee of the Lagos Chamber and one of the 6 vice presidents of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI. Mr. Gbenga Ismail is actively involved in advocacy activities for the Chamber. He chairs the Public Affairs and Advocacy Committee of the LCCI. You see why I say Madam President sent a capable representative. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a closing remark in representing the current president of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Gbenga Ismail, VP. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
So we can.
Good. Thank you for the introduction. I stand in the shoes of the president, Mrs. Toku Mabogunje, and I'll be reading her speech. On behalf of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I would like to express our heartfelt appreciation to our distinguished facilitators and attendees for participating in the Africa Business Ethics Conference 2020 with the theme Tackling Corruption to Reduce Poverty and Unemployment, the necessity for building resilience. As you may be aware, the conference, which is an initiative of Center of Private International Enterprise, CIPE, is aimed at addressing the complex and peculiar challenges by convening stakeholders across the public and private sectors to share views on the strategies required to address the menace of corruption. Let me use this opportunity to congratulate on the successful hosting of this conference and also for coming up with the ABEC initiative. For the past 2 days, we have had our various resource persons share their thoughts on the issue of corruption from a multidimensional perspective. At the various breakout sessions that held on Monday and Tuesday, our speakers raised key issues on the supply and demand side of corruption in Africa from global, regional, and local perspective. The session facilitated conversations on corruption from maritime, public procurement, press freedom, technology, ethics, and integrity in business culture to micro and small enterprises. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, considering the pace and the rate at which corruption is thriving in the African continent, it is safe to posit that the menace appears to be very attractive and rewarding for many. Corruption has found a fertile soil in our continent on which it grows with little or no encumbrances. Evidence has shown that there are over 45% of Africans pay in cash or kind to access public services. Even as one out of 3 Nigerians pay bribes to government officials to sidestep due process. In every country where corruption flourishes, the effect is far-reaching. The few unjustly enriched at the expense of the majority, thereby giving rise to poverty, respect for rule of law. Sorry about this. The few unjustly enriched at the expense of the majority, thereby giving rise to poverty, respect for rule of law is discarded and political instability is imminent. National wealth is diverted to private pockets with implications for public welfare and social inequality. This validates why sustainable development has eluded most African nations. Our distinguished resource persons have outlined several measures and strategies that could help minimize the high incidence of corruption in the private and public sector in the African continent. There was a consensus that the fight against corruption requires the collective efforts of private sector, government, and its agencies, civil societies, trade advocacy groups, international agencies, the media, and the general public. Government must develop the political will in making corruption unattractive, and the private sector must enforce and uphold ethical practices in their business endeavors. It is imperative for African countries to strengthen their institutional systems in a bid to ensure compliance to ethical standards. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry have remained consistent in championing causes that support transparency, accountability, and adherence to ethical standards in the Nigerian business community. Our vision is to remain the foremost chamber of commerce and role model for others in the promotion of business ethics and delivery of qualitative services. In fulfilling this mandate, we have partnered with institutions like the SIPE and other members of the organized private sector in advocating for a better regulatory environment. I and SIPE recently held a public-private dialogue session where we engaged officials of 2 major regulatory agencies on the need to uphold transparency while interfacing with the business community. Our consistent advocacy efforts is in this regard affirm the Chamber's resolve in ensuring that policy and regulatory environment supports private sector growth and development. Beyond the aggregation of suggestions at this conference, it is also imperative to put those suggestions and recommendations into work. There is no one-size-fits-all approach in tackling corruption across African countries, from Egypt to South Africa. Strategies must be designed within the social, political, and economic context of each country. Both the private public sector need to work the talk in the fight against corruption. Once again, I appreciate the participation and contributions of our panelists, resource persons, attendees at ABEC 2020. I thank you all for your kind attention. And I close, I thank Mrs. Miriam Uwais for stepping in the shoes of the Vice President and putting more value to this occasion. Thank you very much, everyone. Mr. Toku Mambaguzo.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Gbenga Ismail, VP LCCI. Thank you for helping us out, and give our greetings and love to Madam President when you get in contact with her. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, what a day it has been. What a day it has been. It has been 3 days of engaging, eye-opening, breathtaking conversation on the issue of corruption. And you will agree that everything was touched. Every aspect was touched on how corruption is a menace, how corruption cannot take us anywhere, how it is a danger to the future of even the unborn. And practical solutions were given from all of our speakers. Let me, before I wrap up today's event, let me start by reciting another special thank to all the various protocol of VIPs we had today, from, of course, His Excellency Professor Yemi Osibanjo, GCO, and the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, who was ably represented by Mrs. Mariam Uwais, MFR, to Dr. Al-Bagher Alafi, Chief Executive Officer, CASE Sudan, Mr. Harun Sidat, Senior Consultant, Governance and Anti-Corruption, West Africa, to Ms. Aisha Osori, Executive Director, OSIWA. We're also thanking Mr. Lars Benson, Regional Director for Africa, SIPE, Mr. Mohamed Ashiru Baba, FSI, FCAI, MNIM, Director Education, Independent Corruption Practices and Other Offenses Commission, ICPC, for gracing us with his presence. We're also thanking Reverend Father Uhusani, Executive Director, Lux Terra Leadership Foundation, Ms. Fatma El-Bawi, who passionately spoke earlier with us amongst the panel discussants, CEO, Milestones Resources, Nairobi, Kenya, Mr. Richard Bystrong, CEO, Frontline Anti-Bribery and former FCP Violator and FBI UK Cooperator, and Chief Chris Okunowo, President, Chairman of Council, Institute of Directors, IOD. And of course, Madam President of the LCCI, who was ably represented too by Mr. Gbenga Ismail, and all of our wonderful, wonderful audience from the live session here at the LCCI building to all those who joined online from all over the globe. We say a special thank you to all of you. I mean, to have given out your time, energy, resources to be live with us online shows that the topic that was picked for this year's conference was very timely and touched the heart of everybody. So we say thank you to all the wonderful participants that joined and hooked up online from all over the globe. And we say a big thank you to all of you. Well, as the saying goes, whatever has a beginning must have an end. And at this point in time, as we say in the media world, it's a wrap. So I've been your host, William Sizomba, telling you to keep in touch with us. ABEC, you have all our social media handles, both LCCI. The ongoing Lagos International Trade Fair is still there. You can stop by and see what's happening there. ABEC has a lot of other activities they do all around the year. So follow them on social media for more information about what they do. And 2021 is already here. Who knows? So we're already getting ready for ABEC 2021. So keep a date with us. Continue to follow us on social media with all the information you need. As I said, my name is William Sizomba. I'm a media consultant with Connect Nigeria, telling you bye for now and enjoy the holidays.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Day 3 of Africa Business Ethics Conference 2020. As we conclude this event that will kickstart the needed change and transformation, let us bear in mind that today's focus shall be the building block of anti-corruption efforts that requires strong personal ethics. This discussion will focus on the interplay between personal ethics and the larger community.
Companies have left because they cannot operate here. I remember a few years ago, one of the big freight companies, an American company, had to leave because of the American corruption laws, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And I remember the newspaper article said, given the introduction of the FCPA in the US, which applies worldwide, they can no longer operate in Nigeria. That is an indictment on our country, that an international company that was doing good business in Nigeria, hiring hundreds of Nigerians, had to leave because they could see no way to operate in Nigeria and still keep to the letter of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. They have essentially told us that it is impossible.
Well, there are several reasons, because it's become systemic and it's almost becoming like a culture. And the efforts to address the issues are more cosmetic and do not go to the root of the problem. It's kind of, being institutionalized.
It's cheaper for you to import a car into Benin Republic and then drive it through a porous border. Interestingly, for about 3 years in the last maybe 6 years, Benin Republic has been importing more cars than the whole of Nigeria. And you ask yourself, we've got 11 million cars on the roads of Nigeria. I don't know what the population of Benin Republic is in total, but to import 200,000 to 300,000 vehicles into Benin Republic, you need to ask yourself the questions, where are those cars ending up? And if they're ending up in Nigeria, then there must be somebody or a group of people who are helping those cars that have bypassed, the borders and the border controls and paying duty, help them get the licenses. Because those cars would have come in without paying duty or without paying the correct duty, but they still got licensed. Somebody or a group of people are benefiting from it.
On the shipping side, a lot of shipping companies recycle their vessels, changing the names of the vessels after a number of years and bring them back in under temporary importation process without good records. Nigeria needs to liaise with the global body, the IMO and Lloyd's in London, and make sure that this stops. That calls NIMASA out. That calls the Customs Service out to address this specifically, because Nigeria is losing a lot of revenue that would have been paid to government as full duty and is rather made as a temporary importation. That is corruption against the government itself.
As we come to the end of this noble event, the SCCI is hosting this conference to develop a white paper for government, the private sector, and civil society organizations to learn more about how multi-stakeholder collaboration can effectively address the menace of corruption in the various spheres of the country's economic and developmental sectors. Therefore, urging the general public to look out for this white paper and never let this conversation leave the front burner. We must tackle the challenges and get plugged into the efforts to minimize corruption. It starts with us as individuals, then it flows into the society through our organizations, the public institutions, the civil society, and beyond.